Hello.
How you doing, mate? You okay?
Yeah, I'm very good. Just a second. Get that clear out of the throat before we start.
Are you on hands-free or are you to your ear?
No, I'm definitely to me ear.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Does that sound okay?
Yeah, you just sounded a little bit echoey.
Did I? That's probably because I was coughing.
No, you do.
Is that better?
Yeah, you just sound a bit distant. Put it on hands-free and see if that sounds any...
All right. That's hands-free.
Yeah, I don't get this hands-free, you know.
Let me take it off the hands-free again.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, is that all right?
Is that now off hands-free?
Yeah, you're next to me here.
Yeah, it does sound better.
Does it?
Yeah. Where are you? You're kidding into the way. You're only around the corner as well.
yeah, just outside. Yeah, Droitwood. So.
I mean, in Bartley Green, and and you've got a Samsung as well. And with Terry Curran in his village up there in Sheffield, and Alan down there in fucking Chelsea. It's just I don't know. It's just mad.
It's not like I'm on the sea coast, is it? You know what I mean? Or in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, I'm literally in the heart of the England.
Exactly.
So,
but
is that sound?
Yeah. No, we'll go with that. Are you? Yeah, you ready for the short pass?
Yeah. Go on. Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Gabbie. How are we doing?
I'm okay, Andy, and welcome all to part 6 now of Book Corner with Andy from myfootballbooks.com. Andy, we always start with a little bit of yourself, a little bit about My Football Books, how you got started, your newsletter, your subscriptions, your bookmarks, etc. Mine is still in page 165 of Grandad What Was Football Like in the 70s before you asked. So yeah, briefly a little bit about yourself before we get into the books, because we've got loads and loads of books to read this month.
There is, yeah. So My Football Books, I've got our own dedicated website, so myfootballbooks.com, which I started just, about 2 years ago at the start of the pandemic, so I found myself a bit of time on my hands. The conversation started with my wife about, I had a bit of time on my hands and reading lots of books, and an idea came to my mind about recommending books, and that's where the website kind of grew a bit of legs, had an idea about what I'd wanted to look on it, and I think it hopes to solve a bit of problems for some people, and I think myself sometimes struggle to find the right, what books to, recommended by people, what's new coming out, what's coming out soon, etc. So that was the idea, to combine it all. So that's the website, and I use the social media such as Twitter and Facebook, etc. to promote, the authors and the great books that's coming out. Thank you for giving a mention of a newsletter I started to do some months back on a monthly basis to share, what's coming out over the month previous or what's coming out next month, and again, just recommended reads as well. So but there's lots of great material out there, lots of great stories of a great sport, Gabbie. So, yeah, that's
absolutely.
Myself.
And during lockdown, it was either building a bar in either at the bottom of your garden or your house or somewhere, or building a website. You chose the website route, and I'm glad that you did, because My Football Books is a great website. You do a fantastic job in promoting football books. Your newsletter is sublime. Everything about what you do is absolute quality, and the books out there are fantastic. My bed at the moment is, there's a suitcase. Sam's got a suitcase packed. She's not leaving me. Well, she is, but only for a spa weekend. And then all the hairdressing stuff, like the blow dryer and the gel and all the rest, and of course the box of chocolates and the bottle of wine. And next to that is Happy Birthday Beaver, Paul the Beaver Trevelyan, a story of sock tags and self-belief. We covered this book last month. I've done a lovely podcast with Paul Trevelyan. It took me 37 minutes to get a word in. He is an absolute genius. In fact, he stopped and said in mid-flow, Gabbie, how are you? Am I okay to get up? You carry on. Absolute gold. And trust me, guys, this book is a work of art. Paul is one of the great sports illustrators of the modern time. The guy is an absolute legend, a genius. He can't read, he can't write. It's his 88th birthday today. I've wished him well. Yeah, absolutely.
And he has been going around for some time, hasn't he?
The book, I can't speak it. Again, I haven't read it all, but I've dipped into it and I've had a look because I love books like that. It's various chapters that talk about, and I have to say, it's written by Neil Jeffreys before people say, well, Gabbie, how can he write a book if he can't read and write? It's told, it literally is told by Neil Jeffreys. And when I say it's told, it's written in the way that Paul Trevelyan talks, because Paul talks at 100 miles per hour. And if you listen to the podcast that I've done, you'll find out why. And it's the most inspirational podcast I've ever done. I am just listening to Paul and just going, wow.
Yeah, well, he's amazing, isn't he? For his pictures, his images, he's got a natural gift in it, and I think you probably didn't realise it was Paul Trevelyan, do you? Until
pen and
ink. But some of his, it's incredible, isn't it?
Pen and ink. He draws in pen and ink. His dad told him, Paul, you don't make mistakes, you don't need a rubber. He threw the rubber in the fire, you don't need a rubber. And it's just incredible. So he draws in pen and ink. You don't make mistakes.
Incredible, isn't it?
Fantastic book. And the story about Don Revie, 1972, Tottenham versus Leeds United in the FA Cup. That was the first time that Leeds United wore the sock tags. A phenomenal story it tells when he goes into the dressing room and Don says, we're not using them today. Why? Make us look a bit silly. We're not going to use them. So the rest, I'm going to leave it for our listeners to look at the podcast, which is on social medias. A Chapter of My Life 1, I believe it is, Book Corner, or on Facebook, or just go onto SRB Media, which is the trunk to our branches. And
I look forward to
it really
look forward to reading that.
Great story, the way that Paul tells it. And it involves one of the greatest goal scorers of our generation. Well, not our generation, but football from the day that we started playing.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. They've got some stories to tell, I'm sure. So I follow him on Twitter as well. I shared about the Beaver, his book coming out, and he did actually contact me and drop me a direct message on Twitter. Yeah. So as well, just to say thank you, which is just to show the quality of the man as well, really. So, brilliant. Look forward to reading that one.
And in the current view, you always recommend a book, and this last 3 weeks, because we like to do it early in the month, but I think last month it was a little bit later in the month.
Yes. I was struck down with COVID for a few weeks.
Somebody was ill.
Well, a week or so, just had a few days bad, and then I come through it. So,
absolutely. So there's 3 that you've sent us from the last time we recorded a Book Corner. The 50th Football, the most influential players by John Driscoll. You also sent us this week Football's Black Pioneers by Bill Hearn and David Gleave. And I have done a podcast with Bill Hearn. What a lovely fella. What a fantastic book. And you always send me on this day, which it was this month on this day, which was the 8th of March, 1956. Laurie Cunningham was born. And then you also sent us the King, my autobiography, Dennis Law with Bob Harris.
Brilliant. Yeah, excellent. Great stories, each and every one of them. That's a great listen as well. I remember listening to one you did with Bill Hearn about football's Black Pioneers. And, brilliant book. Great stories as well, isn't it? In that book. So,
Yeah,
including Laura Cunningham, obviously one of the famous 3 degrees.
Absolutely.
West Bromwich Albion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes through the whole of the book here, looking at all the first black players to play for the respective football clubs, and it really is a fantastic read. So again, another
well timed as well.
Yeah, and I like the book. It's got a nice weight to the book. The pages are different, aren't they? They're almost like glossy pages in that book. It's slightly different to other books.
And I'm sure everyone does the same as me. You go straight to your club to see who was your first for your club. It's the way it's done as well, isn't it? It's done in obviously alphabetical order. Yeah. So obviously, you go straight to your first club, etc. Who was ours, etc. No, each and every one of them is fascinating.
I love the story about Frankie Peterson of Millwall. Tremendous story, and one that Barry Silkman tells, because at the end of the podcast, the current view, I always go out with the tales that Mavericks tell. And Frankie he's a pal of Barry Silkman, and he played for Chelmsford against Barnet. And again, go on to the socials and have a look at it, because it's an absolute scream, and we've got 1 or 2 screams from Barry Silkman. Barry tells a story like no other, and I do believe Barry's doing a book as well. So watch.
Is it? Okay.
Watch this space. I a couple of years back. I done a podcast with Barry, and we've always kept in touch. He's a good lad, and he was saying that there's a possibility that he might do a book. It's a fella that that's pal of his at Sky, whose name escapes me. He's the fella, the ginger-headed lad that does the northern stuff. And he said, Barry, I'll come and stay with you for a couple of weeks. And he said, I wouldn't be able to remember all the stories in a couple of weeks. And sometimes people say, no, but with Barry Silkman, it's absolutely true. I've done a couple of podcasts, and the stories that he's given me are just unbelievable. You're just curling over with laughter the way that Barry tells them.
Excellent. I remember the Frank Peterson, the one you picked out there, who's... But he loved his nights out drinking and smoking, didn't he? I remember reading that. So,
absolutely. I mean, Barry said on the podcast, they were playing against him, and I'll let the listeners listen to Barry. Yeah. But it's a story that does involve a heavy night out before he took the pitch for Chelmsford. It's an absolute classic. And the Barnet manager at the time, when he asked Silky to sort out Frankie Peterson to play that story, it's just a story that should be told and never be forgotten, because it is classic. You wouldn't get it today in the modern game.
Yeah, that's where things have changed, haven't they? Yeah, I think obviously, players, they've had to change as well, haven't they? They've become celebrities beyond kind of all kind of recognition. They can't really have that kind of normal life, sadly, anymore, can they? So, which is a shame, isn't it?
I think, if we had players like Frankie Peterson, like Barry Silkman, like Alan Hudson, like Tony Curry, and Frank Worthington, Stan Bowles, I think they'd still be the same today. And I think football would be the better for it. I think it's only the fact that, we're almost living in a nanny state where somebody will get a mobile phone and say, oh, look at this football player. Well, instead of society saying, mate, take your photo where the sun don't shine, because we ain't that bothered, and don't buy the papers, etc. It is a different time that we live in. But I think that we need to, or some people need to grow a pair and realise that they're football players and they do things out of the ordinary off the pitch, because you know what? That's what they've done on the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. And they make mistakes, because we're all human beings, don't we? So that's why they have to be very careful, even when they're on the likes of Twitter. But whatever even myself, actually, I'm sharing things on my football books. You have to be a little bit careful about what you say. Just be very careful, because people do jump on you, potentially. So you have to, because a lot of these footballers, especially the Premier League ones, I don't think they even put some of the stuff on there, do they? They have their own marketing PR companies.
Yeah,
actually share their tweets. It's sort of a bit sad, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
But
you can't expect a footballer to be on Facebook or Twitter 24/7. They've got a career and they've got to hone their skills, so they would employ people to do that. But I think it's a sad state that we're in at the moment, where people are frightened to tweet and post things. I've always spoke my mind and posted my mind, etc. I've got myself into hot water with certain football supporters, but that's just
people have opinions, though, don't they? Roy Keane, you love it or hate him. He's got an opinion, hasn't he? So and that's why people like it. Simon Jordan, I think, on TalkSport. You know, these kind of guys, they've got opinions, whether you agree or not. It's an opinion, isn't it? And it's always interesting to hear. I might not necessarily agree, but it's nice to hear someone talk with enthusiasm as well, instead of, you know, the old cliches that come out. So,
absolutely.
That's my podium bit.
No, I think you're absolutely right. No, I think you're right, and I like the ranting because, you know, they go to these media training schools and, you know, you'll listen to a footballer or a manager after the game and it's the same old, and you're thinking, just like, forget the script, just tell us really what you think. And I think it's healthy when people are honest, when they're up front, when they're, you know, you've not got to be offensive. There's no need to be offensive. Just express your opinion and you're entitled to it. That's what social media is all about. And do you know what? It's actually called social media, not anti-social media. So be kind and post what you like.
And I'd link that to books. I'll link it to the books, autobiographies. The best autobiographies I read are the ones where they are, you're not holding back, they're telling the truth, and you know, it's black and white, etc. And they've, you know, tell the stories, the good, the bad, and just tell us as it is. The ones that, some books, autobiographies, you've read it, and you can tell they've taken bits out, they're very careful about who they say about this and that, and etc. It just waters it down so much, it's just, you could read it and pretty much know what's happening, sort of thing. So I'll link that to books as well. The tell a true story is,
absolutely.
People engage with it.
Yeah, I've done a number of Legends of the 70s podcasts. I've done 19. In fact, number 20 is, well, we're working on number 20 at the moment. I'm just waiting for the green light. I've got an amber. He's going to do it. And it's Johnny Giles, and you were just talking about autobiographies. A Football Man, the autobiography of John Giles. What a football player Johnny Giles was.
Absolutely.
With Declan Lynch, Hodder and Staunton. Hodder and Staunton published it. But I'm looking forward to talking to Johnny. What a legend of the game.
It's been out for a few years, hasn't it? So I bet there's lots of anecdotes and stories, etc. I don't think I've read that one. But so no, excellent. That'll be a great listen.
And another podcast, which will be the 21st, is with Steve Perriman. And Steve has got a wonderful book out, A Spur Forever, My Lily White and Blue Life with Adam Powley. And Steve's got his latest podcast out now. It dropped today. And it was all about Steve starting out as a 15-year-old going to Tottenham Hotspur. And it's a great listen. Steve is a great storyteller. And in his book, A Spur Forever, foreword by Glenn Hoddle, there's some wonderful stories in there about Steve's career, over 900 games.
Excellent. Well, he learned from the great Bill Nicholson, didn't he? So, and some great characters he would have worked alongside. Ozzy Ardiles, obviously springs to mind.
Yeah, good mate. Ozzy managed with Ozzy out there in Japan. A great time for him.
Excellent. He won two European Cups, the UEFA Cups, wasn't it? 2 FA Cups. A couple of League Cups as well. There's a few, isn't there, when Steve Perriman was playing?
Yeah, Steve, he certainly played in the first all-British final of the UEFA Cup, which leads me nicely to Kenny Hibbitt's Seasons of My Life with Tim Nash, forward by John Richards. And I was with Kenny last week. They were after dinner speaking at the bar in Wollaston I attend. And what a tremendous fella Kenny is. What a wonderful book, Seasons of My Life. And it looks at Kenny's fantastic career. Really, really well-written book with Tim Nash. And certainly one for people to buy, probably on eBay, because he's sold every book now.
I did, really? It's not available on Amazon either?
No, so
Fabulous.
certain players have a certain amount on there, and then when they're sold. So, you know, you probably won't unless somebody is releasing it on eBay, wants to sell it on eBay as a sold book. But it really is worth. And the picture of Kenny, it was Kenny's wife that picked that picture. A fantastic picture of Kenny, an absolute warrior in the famous gold and black.
Brilliant, excellent. Well, what a great he was. 16 years, I think. It was a good time. He was at Molyneux, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So, some great stories in there, I'm sure.
I've been fortunate to do 3 podcasts with Ken about his career as a whole, his time in Seattle Sounders, and I've done one with Al as well, with Kenny about because Alan was Kenny's captain when he was at Seattle Sounders, and also a game of my life when he scored that wonderful goal with Willie Carr and the free kick that promoted Nottingham Forest in a game of my life. So what a fantastic fella. Great stories, great book, and done some lovely podcasts with Kenny. So a little bit more about you. What your website, your newsletter? What have you got for us this month? What should we be buying? And on the back of that, we're going to go into our author of the month, Gary Thacker.
Great, excellent. Well, in my, I'll go through. I always recommend free books, not particularly new ones, but free that stick out for me that I'd recommend. The first one I'll mention is Arthur. It's Arthur Kinnard. He's the first Lord of Football, written by Andy Mitchell. So, if you're not familiar with the name, Arthur Kinnard, he won in his time, and I'll read it from the back here because it's incredible, really. He won 5 FA Cups. He actually played in 9 FA Cup finals, would you believe? Which is pretty remarkable. But he out-organised. He was one of the pioneers, really, of football. He
played for the Wanderers?
He did, that's it, that's it. So famously, they played against the old Etonians and the Royal Engineers, etc. But he was a pioneer of the early game, won the FA Cup with the Wanderers, and he played until he was 50, would you believe, as well. So almost Stanley Matthews-esque, So, but he did more than pretty much anyone to popularise soccer, football at that time, really. And he was a dominant figure. It was presented with the FA Cup in gratitude. But despite he had a privileged background, and his title, of course, etc. But he was very one of these who fought social injustice, spent nights of teaching slum kids to read and write. It's an extraordinary life, really, and just an incredible life that he led. So I think I've mentioned it on one of the podcasts before. If you go on Netflix, there's a series called The English Game, which is really good, really good. It mixes historical facts with a little bit of fiction, but not too much. Overall, it gets the story of Arthur just about right, about what happened, etc. So, and he excelled in loads of other sports as well. He's one of these, God, he could put his hand to anything. It'd be quite frustrating, I can imagine, because he's brilliant at tennis, rowing and swimming and all kinds of things. But he was a proper football star at those times. He could attract crowds of up to 100,000. But great book, Arthur Kinnard, and just these kind of the guys that really did put football on the map, really. Put it in front of the masses, let's say, from relatively small crowds. I think the first FA Cup final was witnessed by about 3,000 people, which is crazy when you think about it now. But that's Arthur Kinnard, the first Lord of Football.
Can I just interrupt you there?
Yeah.
There's a book, isn't there, by Ian Chester, Charles Alcock and the Little Tin Idol, and that's a book about the first FA Cup final, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So good shout there for Ian. And what I did probably last week now, is I went on to Book Corner on our Twitter feed, which is Chapter of My Life 1, Book Corner, and asked various authors to promote your book. You shout out the books, and we will shout them out on the podcast. So I have got a number of books that I am going to shout out a little bit later with all of the authors that engaged with us on Book Corner this month. So,
I know that's one Charles Adcock. There's a good link there because Charles Adcock, A Little Tin Idol, story of the birth of football in the first FA Cup by Ian Chester. So with Charles Adcock, he played against the likes of Arthur Kinneard back in those days coming in. So Charles Adcock, English, Arthur Kinneard, Scottish, etc. And they're both instrumental in terms of football, both in Britain basically. So no, that looks a great book and obviously great time, and it being the 150th anniversary, obviously, of the FA Cup. So looks a really good read.
But isn't it fantastic that 150 years ago, and we've got books that we can reference and we can read, and they're telling the stories about football back in the day. That's why I love doing the podcasts.
Amazing.
I love doing the podcast Book Corner with you. As you know, I don't read many football books. I buy lots of football books, but I don't read any. I don't have the time because I'm always doing podcasts about football and getting the experiences of the people that have written books or played the game. And there's just so many fantastic stories about football. And I would one day like to kit my house out, or certainly one of the rooms, and just have books full of everything about football.
There's
all different clubs, all different things, and historic content of that of football.
There's nothing better than seeing I did actually share on Twitter. I think I did some a few weeks back. I said it's World Book Day actually. That's why it comes to mind. I said share your book pictures of your bookshelves, etc. And some of them are brilliant. I think David Tossell. I think it was David Tossell who shared it. It's like amazing.
Great book in the end. It's almost like a library, isn't it, David?
Unbelievable. So that's what I aspire to.
He's got a great book coming out soon as well. Dono.
Yes, he has. Yeah. Excellent. He's obviously a prolific writer, and that's certainly one to look forward to. But no, good link on that. Now come back to another one I recommend. That was on the newsletter, and linked to that, what we talk about is 50 of the most important moments. It's by the writers of the Football History Boys blog, Ben Jones and Gareth Thomas. So it's been out a couple of years.
Yeah, I've got that.
Out for the great guys at Pitch Pub. Have you? Excellent. Yeah, come out with the guys at Pitch Publishing. It's really good. Starts in the Victorian England from 1857 to the introduction for modern football through 160 years. So it spans everything. It's really good. Picks out some really good ones in there. I picked out 3 in particular, one of them being it talks about the first FA Cup in 1871-72. So, as you said, Wanderers beat Royal Engineers 1-0 in that game. Another one's like the Miracle of Burn. You'll obviously know that one. So, yeah, absolutely.
We still don't know what the Germans injected themselves with at half time.
2-0 down, weren't they?
Yeah.
And it's still talked about even now, isn't it? So obviously Bern was the venue of that final back in 1954 between West Germany and England. It was very much a case that game because it was effectively the world's greatest team, the Hungarians, against the world's enemy, East against West, capitalism against communism, etc. Had it all, didn't it? But how Germany won it in the end was it was the Miracle of Bern, wasn't it? But that's one of the top 50 moments, and one of them mentioned. The last one in the book is VAR. It picks out that as an important moment. So it's just, I think it's interesting I've included that because it probably is, modern, let's say, how it has changed the game, undoubtedly, one way or another. I'm not a fan. You'll never get to hear me say I'm a fan, to be frank. I'm glad I watch football outside of the Premier League quite often, and I can enjoy it without having to think, can I celebrate? Can I not celebrate? That for me. I agree with certain things, where there's no ambiguity, certainly goal line technology, but sometimes when there's opinions, you could look about 7 different angles, you're still not sure, are you?
Clear and obvious.
Yeah.
And if it isn't clear and obvious, VAR doesn't get involved. For me, there's nothing wrong with VAR. It's the idiots that are using it, and that's the problem. That we have the technology, but we're not clever enough to use the technology correctly, And the referees, I think, are the worst referees I've ever seen in the game of football. And I think because of VAR has come into our game, referees are falling back like a trapeze artist, and they've got the safety net. They've got the safety net of VAR, and they're going, oh, well, VAR will pick it up. No, you pick it up. If you miss something obvious, then VAR will say, John, hey, you've missed this. Have a look at it.
What I would say in their defence, though, is that I think players know that as well, though, don't they? Because they proper get onto them. You know, they play up to it as well. You have definitely got to have a strong referee.
But players have always done that. Players have always done it. You know, referees have always refereed. Players have always played. The refs have given decision. Players ain't liked it. They got onto the referee. And nothing ever changes, really. But, you know, absolutely. Some of the decisions, the amount of times I watch a game and I think, how the hell's a referee not seen that? And I think that they're almost looking at VAR as that backup, whereas years ago, you have no backup. You've got to say what you see and bang, right, I think it's a penalty, bang, penalty. And then the linesman, the flag will go up, they think it's offside. So you carry on. You scored a goal, you roll it back, you go, no, it was onside, it's a goal. It should be there to rule goals in, not to rule goals out.
Yeah.
And that's what annoys me. Clear and obvious.
Well, I hope that doesn't put you off that book. That's the last one he just mentioned here. But I think this book is one of these really good references. You've got it as well, then. But it's 50. It just goes through the whole, you know, how football's developed, you know, from those early days to the modern game. So. And the last one I'll mention is, as recommended, the free recommended on my newsletter, is a book by David Goldblatt, who's a prolific writer, and it's on Football Nation, which is a football and history of Brazil. Really fascinating. It's quite similar. There's another book by a gentleman called Alex Velos, Football, which is a Brazilian way of life, but great book, not just purely about football, but I find it, so it might, for some people, if they just want to read about football, it's not quite the book for them. But what this does really does show you how how important football is in Brazil. And I know we say it, certainly here in England, but my word, in Brazil, it literally is.
It's religion,
like, religion, that's the best word to use. Thanks, Gabbie. But no nation's got itself aligned closer to football than Brazil have for, you know, over the centuries, etc. You know, the way they come together when they win the World Cups, you know, as they have done, but when they lose, it's catastrophic, isn't it? So even so recent, you remember when they lost, obviously in the Maracanã the Maracanã against Germany, wasn't it? Was it 7-1?
Yeah,
semi-final.
Didn't they?
Yeah, that's it. But it's a great read. And you learn a lot about Brazil, and it covers its political, social, and economic, how it links in, and also a lot of the likes of Pelé, how he was encouraged to help out with politics, etc., is happening, which is incredible, really. You know, the link between football and everyday life. But really, really good book. David Goldblatt is a cracking writer. He's done a couple of other books. The Ball is Round is one of those, just an outstanding book. Huge book. If you're going to start that one, Gabbie, it'll probably take you, well, I don't know, over 20 years. It's a huge book.
I'll be dead by the time I finish it.
It's about 800 pages. It is a massive book. Yeah, it's huge. In fact, his last book, his last book, The Age of Football, which is like an updated version, 21st century. And of course, I've got it here, actually. I'm just going to flick. How many's in this one? 650 pages. Yeah, it's a big read, but it is really. I'd say The Age of Football, the one by David Goldblatt, if you're an alien and you were landed on Earth and you want to know a bit about football in the modern day, that's the book. So, but yeah, be dedicated though. It will take you some time to read it.
Isn't it phenomenal though? These writers and authors.
It's amazing, isn't it?
They're just the way they're going. It's almost like 2020 cricket and a test match in it. It's like nuts and bolts. It's like proper, full on. This is, do you know what? I'd love to just not work and read football books all day long. I'd love to be able to do that, but sadly my world isn't like that. It doesn't lend itself to do that, but I would love to be able to do that. I did say on the podcast,
talented people.
Yeah, before we go into the interview with Gary, who's our author of the month, I did mention at the end of the podcast last week, I'd like to mention a couple of books about Wad the God, Tony Waddington. And there's a fantastic book. And again, I've done a podcast with John talking about his book, Tony Waddington, director of A Working Man's Ballet. That's the title, The Working Man's Ballet of Alan Hudson's autobiography. Wad the God was like a second father to Alan Hudson, and a fantastic book by John Leonard. Also, John's other book, Flight to Bogota, England's football rebel Neil Franklin. A tremendous story, great story of one of football's all-time greats, Neil Franklin. Lovely story in there about Big Ron. I passed Big Ron's number on, and he was telling the story about how he dispossessed Neil Franklin when he played against him. We don't know whether it was true or not, but Ron tells a great story. And why not let the story just tell itself, and why let the truth get into in the way of a great story? And Ron can tell some phenomenal stories. And the year we nearly won the league, Stoke City, and the 74-75 season by Jonathan Baker. Fantastic, lovely book there. Great picture.
Just come out,
lovely picture of Tony Waddington. You know, through doing all my podcasts with Alan and being a friend of Alan Hudson, I seem, you really believe that you don't know the person, Tony Waddington, but you get a great insight into the workings of Tony. And when I look at the front cover of this book, it just shows a genius. You know, Waddington's looking there on the left profile side of his head, and if you could read that mind, you know, it's just a fantastic. The way that picture is just caught. Totally.
Good, isn't it?
Yeah, I just think it's phenomenal. And the pottery is there, and Alan Hudson jumping into Greenoff's arms. I think that was when he scored against Manchester City. Almost certain it's the Manchester City goal. Greenoff and Hudson. I mean, what a double act they were.
Well, Tony Waddle had an eye for talent, didn't he? He had a flair for sensational signings, didn't he?
Well, he was a former Busby baby.
Legends.
Yeah, he was a former Busby baby. He was with Man United at Matten. Yeah. He had a great relationship with Matten. Bought many an inside forward from Matt Busby. He liked his inside forwards. The potteries, the fans there in Stoke, very knowledgeable. Loved their football. And Alan Hudson loved his time there at Stoke City. And that is a fantastic book about arguably Stoke City's greatest ever team and greatest ever season. And I'll defy anybody to say that it wasn't, because I think it was. And I have done a podcast with Uddy talking about that season. We're talking about in a game of my life when they played Liverpool on Easter Monday and Tony Waddington got the fire brigade in to water the pitch so Alan Hudson could play against Leeds United and Terry Conroy scored a brace. So, I love the teams that Uddy played for, because, when you do the podcast and your mates and that, you look into it and you just, it's just phenomenal.
That's what great your podcast. It's brilliant because it brings it to life as well, doesn't it? Exactly that. You can picture it, you can image it, can't you?
Yeah,
it's a bit like when you read a book. Exactly.
They were there. Yeah. Uddy were there. He was, he was orchestrating.
He's got some great stuff. Great story.
And so that's what I like to. I love to look at the books, and if I can read the books, but make the podcast with the people that created the headlines.
Yeah, absolutely. Phenomenal. Cracking season, that one, wasn't it? Yeah, 74-75.
Yeah, one of the greatest seasons, because we've got the story of the 1971-72 season as well. Phenomenal book.
Absolutely, yeah. That came out, it was back in the last year now, wasn't it?
Yes,
So,
yeah, it
great.
was.
Yeah, great book. Again, great cover, and again from Pitch Publishing. So they produce some quality books. I love all the front covers. I think you could put you get like the cover of the Tony Wanderton on it. I mean, if you get it looks appealing, doesn't it? And I do get where I know we joke about reading books, etc. But I know what you mean. Some books. It's just nice to look at, isn't it? It's nice to hold, isn't it?
I'm looking at him holding that. Yeah, I'm looking. And I love the way that Pitch, produce the book as well, because they, when you look at some other books, it's just the size of the book, the way that it's like the binding of the book. I just think a book is a work of art. It's almost like vinyl. Vinyl's a work of art, and I do like to buy them. And so Dan Abrams that done that wonderful book, 71-72 season, that was a tremendous season. That was also a tremendous season. Most seasons in the 70s was a fantastic
tremendous
season.
Decade. Yeah.
And brings us up to not 19, but it was 2011, 2012 season. I caught up with Gary Thacker, who is the author of the month this month, and he was talking about his new book, Out of the Blue, when Chelsea won the FA Cup that year. They won the Champions League that year. But we started off talking about his career and what he does with these football times. Welcome to Book Corner. It's a catch up with one of my favourite authors, podcasters, journalists and writers, Mr. Gary Thacker. Guys, we've got you on here today to talk about your fantastic new book, Out of the Blue. But for people that don't realise and know who Gary Thacker is, and I can't believe that there's anybody on Book Corner that doesn't, let's just have a little bit of your background first, please.
Yeah, sure, mate. Okay, so I come from Warsaw, not very far away from your good self, Paul, originally. Now living in Spain. The book I'm going to talk about today will be my sixth book, including a couple of novels in there as well. I'll work a lot with these football times and the senior management team there. Worked a lot of podcasts with them. And I also write a weekly column over here in Spain for an English language newspaper about La Liga.
Fantastic. Let's just harp on to these football times, because I think you guys are fantastic. You've wrote so many books collectively. Who are the guys in these football times? I know Stu's got a new book coming out about the 1982 España 82. There's Stephen Scragg that's wrote the trilogy, and we're going to be talking about the Champions League, but when Stephen wrote it, it's the European Cup. And who's the other players?
Well, there are several. Basically, the team, the whole collective is about 50 or 60 people.
Right.
In the senior leadership team, there's myself, Stu, and Stevie, as you mentioned. There's Aidan Williamson, Chris Weir, Josh Butler, and Will Sharp, and Paul McParlin. So there's 7 or 8 of us in the senior leadership team. But as I say, the whole These Football Time sort of group is 40, 50 people.
Fantastic. And you do some splendid work, produce some great podcasts, and loving the South American stuff at the moment as well. But you did touch upon, you've got a couple of novels out there. The first one was there any naming after a protest song by Joe South? Because it's the games people play.
Do you know? No, the short answer is no. I don't even know the song, mate. It's a title that just came to me actually. I was writing the book, and because it's all about people sort of. I only used the phrase that people are being players sometimes, and sometimes you're being played, and sometimes you don't know the difference between the two until you find out later. So it just came to mind that the title. So no, I'm not familiar with the song, Paul, to be honest with you.
And a whole new ball game is part 2. How's Sophia? And is there going to be a trilogy? Because you guys like trilogies, don't you?
We certainly do. You know, I did a podcast with the guys actually about the book a few weeks ago, and they were asking me the same question. Yeah. I'd always got the idea of doing a sequel to the book because I've got the sort of continuation of the story in my head, but obviously other matters sort of taken over. So I've got the Chelsea book coming out, which we're going to talk about later, and I'm also currently working now on a book about the great Ajax teams of the early 70s who won the European Cup 3 times in the bounce, which is due out in May 2023. So I don't know, I might have a look at it then. It's got so many sort of little subplots going on in the background in my mind as to how I could develop it. So yeah, it's quite possible, mate. It's quite possible.
And how was the dynamics between fiction and fact? Because you've also wrote a fact book, Cheers, Tears and Jeers, the history of England's World Cup, which hasn't been it hasn't been very good since 66. And I mean, there's an argument they only won it really in 66 because it was at home.
It's true. It's a good point, mate. It's probably true as well, mate, because I don't think they're going to win it away from home in South America either before or after that. I actually wrote the first novel while I was also finishing off my book about the Dutch teams of the Oranges 74 and 78 World Cup playing the Cruyff-Krol era. And it was difficult. So I was sort of finishing one off. It was an awful lot of about 2 or 3 months. And people said to me, "Well, how do you do that?" Well, it's sort of I couldn't write 2 novels at the same time. Yeah. But when you're sort of doing a novel, a factual book, it's sort of easy to sort of immerse yourself in one world because it's entirely separate. It's like reading a book and cooking at the same time. Yeah. You couldn't read 2 books at the same time, but they're totally different genres, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking at the wonderful book, Beautiful Bridesmaids Dressed in Orange, an orange spelled in the Dutch way, the proper way, the unfulfilled glory of Dutch football. And Johan Cruyff is looking through the lens at me. It's a fantastic picture that is of Johan. And Johan Naiskin's on the back, of course. What a team. And what a team Chelsea were. We go back many years to Chelsea. You were born, I believe, in 1956. The year that my team, Birmingham City, got to the FA Cup final and got done by Don Revie and the Revie plan. Although many recent football, not our legacy fans, but the Johnny-come-latelys, think that Pep Guardiola invented the deep line centre forward, but it was certainly at the year of your birth.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Hiddy Guti is the Hungarians in the early 1950s. I mean, obviously 53 Gabbie Wembley. Yeah. He played as a deep line centre forward. So people who think Messi was the originator of the false nine under Guardiola, as you say, Paul, they are the Johnny-come-latelys, mate. There's not often anything new in football. It's just recycled ideas and presented in a different way.
Absolutely, and probably played in that position because Laszlo Kubala didn't he'd already defected to the West, hadn't he? What a group of players they were, the Hungarians. Yeah.
Amazing team. I mean, talk about one of the best teams not to win the World Cup. I mean, you look at the Hungarians in 54, and then you got the Dutch in 74, Brazil in 82. There's some great teams not won the World Cup.
And there's a wonderful book that captures all that by one of your friends in these football times, Aidan, isn't it?
Yeah, to be honest with you, we've got a pod due in not too distant future to talk about it. So I haven't actually seen the book yet, but knowing the way Aidan works and his sort of dedication to detailed research, it's going to be an absolute barn burner for sure.
Absolutely. And 56, so in 66 you were 10, so you really had a good insight into England winning the World Cup. A few years after, Chelsea, your team, won their first FA Cup in 1970, went on to win their first trophy in Europe in 1971. I've got so many stories of those times, the kings of the King's Road, and I'm guessing that's why you fell in love with Chelsea Football Club, because they were such a fantastic group of players.
Well, that's certainly well. I mean, my sort of love affair with Chelsea goes back earlier than that. I mean, I remember supporting Chelsea when Jimmy Greaves got sold. I could never. I mean, I was only 3 or 4 at the time, and I remember my dad telling me that Jimmy Greaves was going to play for Chelsea. But I couldn't understand why. Why would it something not? I mean, in my sort of naive, very early childhood. But I mean, coming from Warsaw, nowhere near Chelsea. I don't know why I'm a Chelsea fan, but I'm where am I now? I'm 65 now, 66, not too distant future. So I've been in Chelsea for over 60 years. So you see these people sometimes saying, "Oh, you're only Chelsea fan since Abramovich turned up and you started winning." You think, "Oh, that ain't true." Because I remember, where were you when you were shit? I was supporting Chelsea when we were shit a number of times.
Absolutely, but you wasn't back in them days, and just after that you had the Catch Us If You Can team with Terry Venables and George Graham, and then sadly a few of them had a problem in Blackpool, and Tommy got rid of them, and then Huddy and the boys, the new group, come through to Chelsea, and Chelsea, the Kings of the King's Road, were also the Kings of the King's Road in 2011, 2012. When did you decide to write the story? Because it is an unbelievable story of how Chelsea did become champions of Europe, and it really was against all odds, wasn't it?
Oh, I mean, it's one of these stories that, if I wrote a novel about it, the publisher would kick my backside and say, "Don't be ridiculous, nobody's going to believe anything like that." I mean, I've got in my mind to write the Chelsea story or the Beautiful Bridesmaids story first, but I opted for the Dutch one because it's got a wider appeal. But once I got that sort of agreed by the publishers and working my way through, they were keen to get for me to follow up with the Chelsea one. So I suppose it's been sort of, it's been 5 years in the thinking, but sort of 2 years in the development. But it's a crazy story. Paul, I've talked to people so many times about this, and a season where the team were sort of having the worst season they had for a decade. Ridiculous in the Champions League. Look like they're going knocked out in the group stages. Then they played Benfica. And what away Benfica, where Benfica had lost a European game at home for about 3 years, and then nearly chucked it away in the home leg. And then the famous Napoli game, of course, when Velos wrote the longest resignation letter in the history of mankind by picking the team he picked. 3-1 down, almost 4-1 down in Cardiff, playing off the line. Amazingly turned that around. And then the ridiculous games against Barcelona. I mean, just absolutely crazy. And then to cap it all, to go and play Bayern Munich in their own stadium and get absolutely hammered. Another Barcelona hammering, in effect, for being entitled into the game, and then to go win it on penalties. It's the most ridiculous story when I've spoken to people in the past, I call this the most ridiculous story in the history of the European Cup, and come up with something that beats it. Nobody can. I mean, they mentioned the Man United come back in 99, Liverpool winning after looking to go in, being 3-0 down against. But that was one game.
Yeah.
This was 10 games. Yeah. Just absolutely crazy.
And that ultimately, Gary, is the difference. Yes, it was a great comeback by Liverpool. We didn't think that they would, at 3-0 down against that fantastic AC Milan team, get back into the game, let alone win it. And Manchester United, if you actually come in on 90 minutes and saw the score at 1-0, you'd think, right, but, they've actually lost the game of football.
Yeah.
But to score those two late goals was phenomenal. But Chelsea, it was that hit and miss. It was that Villas-Boas even gets the sack, doesn't he? During the season, Roberto Di Matteo takes over and carries that baton, wins the FA Cup. They finish sixth in the Football League. They get quarterfinals of the League Cup and win the Champions League. It really is absolutely crackers. And I was just looking there that they beat Liverpool 2-1 in the final. And what a save, I have to say, by Peter Cech off Andy Carroll. I mean, what a goalkeeper he was. And he really played his part in the Champions League win as well, didn't he? Especially in the penalty shootout.
Yeah, absolutely. I just said how remarkable the story was, and I even forgot to add in about the FA Cup, which you quite rightly put in there, mate. I mean, it must be one of the greatest saves in the history of FA Cup final, the one against Andy Carroll. But I mean, not only the penalty shootout in the final, but he also denied Messi. He didn't say the ball, Messi hit the crossbar. But I've got a story in the book, and I read about what Cech said, that he was aware, because I think there's 10 games that Chelsea had played Barcelona, where Messi had featured, and he'd never scored against Chelsea. Yeah. And in this penalty, it's obviously because they sort of hammered Chelsea for so long, just after half-time, I think it's about 55 minutes into the game, when they get the penalty, which incidentally, Fabregas later said that he dived and Pogba hadn't touched him, but it was a big game. What can you do? Well, you can't argue with that, because what player wouldn't have done that? Yeah. But he was conscious of, and he thinks Messi was too, and he said, when he approached the ball, I decided I was not going to move. I just stood still. In the end, because you see Messi wanted to take the kick, he looks at Cech for a while before he looks down at the ball and takes the shot. Obviously, it's not because Cech hadn't moved. He was going to just lift it over him, but obviously he crashed against the crossbar. So perhaps even aside from being a great goalkeeper. And then, of course, he had the penalty against Robin in extra time in the final as well. So, obviously, his sort of mental attitude did us a favour as well as his goalkeeping talent.
And that was another one that Drogba gave away. I mean, he was a liability, wasn't he, in Chelsea's box? It was bloody good in the other box, but in Chelsea's box, typical central striker. But again, what a player as well, wasn't he, Didier Drogba?
Oh, amazing. Yeah, as you say, real proper forward tackle when defending. I mean, come back into the corners, otherwise keep out the way, guy. Get out the end of the pitch. I mean, it's amazing player for us, and not only as a sort of player, but the things he did for charity in Cote d'Ivoire, his own country, afterwards building hospitals and stopping a civil war. I mean, even outside of football, the stories about Drogba are such a legend, and I think ever since he left, Chelsea have been looking for the next Didier Drogba. They've signed so many players, so much money, and everyone sort of fell short. I mean, Chelsea buying strikers, it's been a disaster ever since Chris Sutton.
Yeah, it's one of these things. I mean, Alan Hudson, who would do a regular podcast with Uddy, speaks so highly of the King of Stamford Bridge, and there's not many Peter Osgoods. Unfortunately, Ramsey and Revy didn't see the beauty in Oz, but he went to Mexico, of course, and Bobby Moore said to Alan Hudson, your mate was terrific in Mexico. Some of the stories that you heard about Ozzy, he said nothing like that, Al. He was superb. Sadly, Alf didn't play him. And, I think Ozzy had 5 England caps. But Drogba, I mean, again, one of the first foreign nationals over here to put their money to charity. I'd not really heard of that before Drogba started it.
No, it's true. But just a quick word about Ozzy. Ozzy is my all-time Chelsea legend favourite. I've got a picture of Ozzy on my sort of photo shootings with standing outside his statue outside Stamford Bridge, and he just simply headed the King and I, because he was the King. He was always my favourite player. In fact, as we talk now, I'm wearing a replica Chelsea FA Cup final 1970 shirt with 9 on the back. So there you go. But yes, I mean, he should have played when we played Brazil. We nearly got late on. Honestly, I think 19 at the time had just been the league's top scorer. You need a goal. So you got Ozzy on the bench. Who do you turn to? Nefastal. I mean, a decent striker, but Ozzy was a perishing goal scorer. But Ramsey didn't like him, as you say, and Huddy's right. If he's the best player that Huddy's played with, then he must be some decent player. But go back to Drogba. He has started training many others afterwards, obviously doing the same sort of thing. I think Sadio Mane at Liverpool does a lot of similar work in Senegal. And a lot of players do, but he was probably the first to sort of set that trend, and more power to him for that, mate.
And in the league, the leading scorer there was 2, Super Frank on 11. And Danny Sturridge, I didn't realise that. Danny Sturridge scored 11 goals for Chelsea that year. Frank was top scorer in all competitions with 16. Again, what a player Frank Lampard was. But, again, when he was a kid, and it was with Uncle Harry, took dog's abuse. Look at the puppy fat on him, he'll never make a footballer. But Frank Lampard got every drop of ability out of his body, didn't he? He worked his backside off. And as a manager, you can see that with Frank as well.
Well, that's exactly what I said to people about when they asked me about Lampard. I think as talent goes, he was far away from being the best, the most talented midfield player. But what he got was he grabbed every ounce of ability out of because the effort he put in. And the ridiculous stat is that, and I can't remember the exact figures, but he's either the 4th or 5th highest goal scorer in the history of the Premier League, and he isn't even a striker. He ain't even a striker, mate. I mean, he scored more goals than people such as Robbie Fowler. I think it's the Shearer, Rooney, Wright. I think Lampard scored more goals than Thierry Henry. I might be wrong, but ridiculous amount of goals for a midfield player. I mean, he's Chelsea's top goal scorer. He scored more goals than the likes of Ozzy, Kerry Dixon, Bobby Tamblyn. It's just ridiculous amount of goals he scored. And not only not only did he score goals, but he was a workaholic midfield, dogged about in midfield and got back and defended as well. Amazing player.
Absolutely. Villas-Boas, you referenced him about the resignation letter. He also had a row with Ashley Cole. You could hear that at Stamford Bridge as well, couldn't you? Apparently, not the floors below.
Well, yeah. I mean, apparently, I spoke to
no names.
A very no Patrick, a very, very famous Chelsea fan, a very extremely wealthy Chelsea fan. It was at the same hotel in Naples where the club was staying before the game. And his room was 2 or 3 below, but directly below where Villas-Boas called Ashley Cole into the room to tell him he wasn't playing. And the sort of language apparently was, this guy, talk about losing the dressing room. This guy had lost the dressing room, and he posted to Timbuktu. It's just terrible situation. And in that game, bear in mind, this is it was a quarter final of the Champions League. He left on the bench Essien, Ashley Cole, Lampard, I can't remember else, Miguel. And he said that Ashley Cole wasn't fit to play because he'd had an injury against Everton a couple of games previously, and he said he wasn't fit to play. And yet, because there was an injury to Basingwa, 7 or 8 minutes into the game, Ashley Cole came up and played almost the entire game, which gives the light to the assertion that he wasn't fit to play.
You see, what you do as a manager, you just say to Ashley, Ash, are you fit? Yes, Gaffer, you're playing. It's as simple as that, isn't it? You don't tell Ashley Cole that you ain't fit when Ashley Cole knows he's fit and he can play there. Yeah. And dropping Super Frank as well. You just look at some of the things that Villas-Boas done at Chelsea was quite incredible. And I think that sometimes, especially with a young manager coming from a foreign country, because he'd done okay, hadn't he? I think he went unbeaten, didn't he, when he managed over in Portugal. But the English Premier League is very, very different to the Portuguese league. And the differential in ages between senior pros at Chelsea and Villas-Boas wasn't that great. And he seemed to try and distance himself instead of working with them players. When Mourinho come in at Chelsea, he'd done the polar opposite, didn't he? He recognised what talent Chelsea had got and worked with them. Difference.
Absolutely. Well, Villas-Boas, when he was in Porto, he'd won the league with Porto without losing a single game, and won the Europa League, or what it's called the UEFA Cup in those days. But yeah, I mean, he got this when he came to Chelsea. He got the project, which was apparently it agreed with Abramovich, or so the story goes, that he was going to sort of reduce the age profile of the squad by getting rid of players such as Lampard, Drogba, Terry, Ashley Cole, Peter Cech, Essien, break this sort of player power room that's forgetting. But instead of doing it in a way that, in a more sort of gentle, evolving way, he went in, stamped his foot in the puddle and created a lot of ripples and then wonder why he got wet.
Absolutely. But again, managers with experience go into situations and understand that, and I've always been of this opinion, that a team's only as good as the senior pros, and it's the senior pros that run the dressing room, and the manager's job therefore easy.
Absolutely, but as you say about Mourinho, different approach entirely. And Mourinho, when he came into Chelsea, when he got the Chelsea job, Frank Lampard was at an England gathering, and he'd spoken to the FA about just want to go and say hello to Lampard. He introduced himself. I think Lampard had just come out of the showers, was getting sort of dressed after a training session. And he said, I'm Jose Mourinho, blah, blah. I'm going to make you the best midfield player in the world. Now, whether he actually was going to do that or not, Lampard said, it made me feel 10 foot tall. This is a guy who believed in me. And that, as you say, Paul, that's different for somebody who sort of goes in and acts like some kind of despot, and somebody else who understands the value of experienced players and knows that they're the guys that win you trophies. Absolutely,
that's a 100% true story as well with Mourinho and Frank Lampard. Because I remember Alan Hudson telling me the same story.
Good stuff.
But again, Frank, that's what you do with players of Frank Lampard's ability. The FA Cup final. Let's just briefly talk about the FA Cup final. And the book, is it about just the Champions League or the season as a whole?
It's the season, Paul. The FA Cup's covered as well. There are a whole chapter covered to the FA Cup,
that final against Liverpool, Chelsea, Liverpool again, history, haven't they? Okay, people will say, oh, it's only modern history, but now they go back years as well in the days of Shankly and stuff and what have you. So when you get an FA Cup final between Chelsea and Liverpool, it is something special, and it delivered, didn't it? Ramirez scored the first goal, Drogba scored the second. There were 2-0 up against Chelsea, and they're looking as though they were on easy street, wasn't they?
They were indeed, mate. Yeah, and Chelsea had played Liverpool 3 times that season. Actually, they hadn't played them at that stage because I think the last game was before the Champions League final. But they played Liverpool 3 times that season and twice the season before the league, and had lost every game. Liverpool had come to Chelsea and knocked them out of the League Cup at Stamford Bridge. So they hadn't particularly got a decent record. But Drogba at Wembley, at the Wembley final, is like some kind of, I don't know, it's like some kind of god of the arena. I think he scored more Wembley final goals than any other player. I think that's true. Yeah, I might remember. He certainly scored a lot in major finals there, be it League Cup or FA Cup, and and then we had obviously the Carroll. I think Carroll scored the first goal. I think, if memory serves me right. And then obviously the amazing check save and Carroll, I sort of did a little research over this afterwards, and Gerrard, fair play to the guy. He said, well, if that's what the referee says, I'm happy to go with his decision. I mean, but Carroll was obviously sort of celebrating. But if you look at the replays, it doesn't look like it crossed the line.
No, it doesn't.
But it does look like checks pulled off an impossible save, and amazing goalkeeper.
Highest high and lowest low of the season as a whole.
I guess the lowest low was probably the game that ended up with that was first Bowis's last game, which was the 1-0 defeat at the Baggies, which ended up being, the Baggies fans were chanting, which is middle of March, sometime early March. The Baggies fans were chanting, you're getting sacked in the morning, and you get that quite often. This time it was true. Highest high, I guess, has to be when Drogba rolled that penalty in the last sort of kick of the game. And I've got a picture that the kids bought me up on my wall. And it's sort of from behind Drogba, and he's rolled the ball into one corner, and Neuer, he's sort of diving right to the corner. And I remember Martin Tyler shouting, he's done it, the greatest night in the history of Chelsea Football Club. I guess I can't argue Martin Tyler, can I?
It was the first time that they'd won the Champions League or the European Cup, wasn't it?
Chelsea, absolutely, yeah. They lost the final, obviously, 4 years earlier in Moscow when
JT won it.
Flipping with a vital penalty against Manchester United. And,
and then, of course, they won the Europa League the season after.
Yeah.
Chelsea did. And they've actually won everything now that they can win. Apart, in club football, you can't win the World Cup or the Euros, but falling short of that, Chelsea have won everything, haven't they?
They have indeed, yeah. Obviously, sort of after we'd won the European Cup in 2012, Di Matteo only lasted, I don't know, a few months. I think he's by sort of December time he got the sack. We sacked Ancelotti the year after he'd won the double. Yeah. So, it's not unusual. But and then we won the Europa League on Benitez, as he was there as the interim manager. But obviously, it's very kind of them to do this, to win the Champions League last term, just to help my book sales along, because it's making it very topical again. So that was very decent of them. And obviously then to go and win the World Cup Championship, and every sort of pot that Chelsea could win, they've now won. I'm just waiting for them to enter a team in the belt race next year.
You never know, they probably will win it. But with Abramovich now leaving, things are going to possibly change there for Chelsea. But you look at the managers, you've just referenced that in the space of, a couple of seasons, they've had 4 managers. It's ridiculous to maintain a level of success at the elite level, Champions League, Europa League, FA Cup, Championships, and change your managers as consistently as Watford. It is quite incredible that Chelsea did do what they did.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right, mate. It almost defies logic that to be that successful, to win so many pots with that sort of rotation management. When people say that the hot seat at Chelsea, it really is hot because it's still warm from the previous guy when anybody else moves in. And yet, it's difficult to sort of criticise because, you can't say it don't work. You can't say it ain't work because I think from when Abramovich took over to now, Chelsea have won more trophies than any other English club. I think that's true.
Yeah.
It certainly used to be. I think that's still the case. And so, in Europe, very few clubs keep coaches any longer than 2 years. But in Chelsea, if it's 2 months, you don't know, I suppose, really.
Absolutely. What contributors did you have to the book? I'm guessing that there were a number of people that you went to get their experiences of that season. And did Stevie Scragg give any input? Because you did give some input to the undisputed champions of Europe, how the gods of football became European royalty, and you did become European royalty in 2012.
Indeed. I don't think he has in this book. Actually, I quote Steve quite often in the book I'm writing about Ajax at the moment.
Yeah.
But I don't think it is in the Chelsea book. But I managed to speak to quite a few decent, well celebrated people. I mean, Jonathan Northcroft, the Times, and the Telegraph. I'm not quite sure now. I spoke to Rafa Honigstein about the Bayern game, and Uli Hesse, who is a German author. It's amazing how helpful people are sometimes. I mean, the book I'm writing now, I managed to get an interview with Ruud Krol.
Wow.
And Johnny Rep. I mean, absolutely amazing. So, in previous books, I spoke to Graham Hunter. People are so nice once you manage to get in touch with them. It's really, really helpful.
I'm surprised Stephen was still talking to you, actually, after you beat Liverpool 2-1 in the FA Cup finals. We have a good bit of banter, me and Stevie, on podcasts, because the other guys, Steve lives in Hull, so he's a Hull fan, if anything, but he doesn't really support any clubs. And we've got Paul Mack, who's an Everton fan. Yeah.
So Steve and I have a lot of banter about Chelsea and Liverpool, but they've been amazing the last couple of seasons, and Crofts been wonderful there. But they're always great games. We played them a month or so back. That great 2-2 game at Stamford Bridge where Liverpool were 2-0 up and Chelsea came back third. Some great games. Chelsea got a history of sorts of being involved in great games. You mentioned about Hoodie earlier, and he's played some great games for Chelsea as well. You mentioned about the 71-72 Cup Winners' Cup triumph. Great days. And we almost Chelsea now. It's you almost. I won't say you expect to win, but if you got a chance. When Hoodie and obviously Charlie Cork were playing, Eddie Mack, Chopper Harris, Peter Benetti. When we won something, it was something special. It was something special, and those guys delivered some great performances, some great entertaining games as well.
I'm guessing the preparation for 2012 was slightly different to Athens in '71, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I'd guess so, mate. I don't think the journeys down to the King's Road for a couple of beers were sort of involved in the preparation that Di Matteo put together, mate.
It was the Athens Hilton. Uddy had popped in there because he was walking off a dead leg, so he got a taxi up to the Athens. Was going past the Athens Hilton, and he says, just drop us off here, because he was only a young kid. I think I was 19 at the time.
Yeah,
and probably wouldn't go to Athens again. And it's in the Hilton, and he said, I walk through to the pool area, and he said, Paul, I seen a table. There's Osgood, Charlie Cook, Sponge, and Johnny Fennell, one of the mates. He said, I've never seen so much alcohol on a table. He said, I said to us, he said, you do realise that we didn't win last night. We're playing them tomorrow in the replay. And he says, right. Young Good, you go and have an early night because you're going to do my running and I'll score the goal. And Ozzy always delivered. But Uddy said, if the manager of Real Madrid or the coaches had gone into the Athens Hilton, they would have seen 3 Chelsea players off their nuts. And that's exactly the words Hudson used. Different with Robbie Di Matteo in 2012. But how did the players get on with Robbie? I know with Dave Sexton, there was a lot of stick, but no carrot. But what was the dynamics like with Robbie?
I think the difference is that, and this is where he could succeed, where Dos Boas failed, is he was a Chelsea man.
Yeah.
before obviously his playing career. A similar thing happened when Avram Grant took over from Mourinho. They brought in Steve Clarke as an assistant. So there was a Chelsea sort of, it wasn't totally new, somebody from outside. Well, Villas-Boas had that sort of, detachment from the club, whereas Robbie Di Matteo and the players, I think, although they call, and I sort of got a few interviews, I did interview them, but I've seen interviews with them which I've used in the book, where they say that, they call Di Matteo now, they call it Robbie. Now, at the time, they called him boss. But even then, although he wasn't sort of, what's the word I call it, generations apart from them, he wasn't, it seemed to be, have earned his respect because of what he did on the pitch, rather than, I think, when you get a manager go to a club, any club, especially as a young manager, you've got to have some cachet about you. You've got to be able to put your medals on the table. Where you've got to have succeeded as a player or already have success as a manager on a long-term basis. And if you haven't, you've got to try. It's a difficult job to earn respect. When you look at it, it's not this, no disrespect to Doncaster Rovers, but you're not going to Doncaster Rovers. You're going into a top Premier League team. You've got to be able to, you require respect. And if you don't bring that with you, you've got to earn it very, very quickly. And I think that was the advantage Di Matteo had, that he had that respect already because of things he'd done with Chelsea and trophies he'd won with Chelsea, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And the quickest goal in the Wembley final as well. What a strike that was, in the bar and straight in.
Yeah, it was, Middlesbrough,
But, the book, you've got your own Twitter feed, your own social media, you're big on that. So let's have a shout for how people can purchase the book and how they can link up with you, Gaz. And also, when does the book come out? 'Cause it's not quite out. It's out in April, isn't it?
You're right, mate. It's at the 11th of April.
Yeah.
You can get on Twitter. I have a Twitter feed for it, as you mentioned, which is at OOTB 2012, which is out of the blue 2012. So it's at OOTB 2012. The book is available for pre-order now. It's actually, I've just looked this morning, actually, for when I was doing a bit of work on my current book, that it's currently at number 8 in the European Cup section on Amazon, and number 12 in the Chelsea section. So even though it's not out for another month yet, it's still doing pretty well. But anybody's interested can follow it on Amazon. But if you just plug my name into Amazon, that's Gary, Gary, Thacker, Thacker. I've got my own Amazon page, so all my books are listed on there, and Out of the Blue is sitting there nicely, with just a click away from being ordered.
And your Twitter page as well is all -blue-days, isn't it? So, if people want to get hold of Gary Thacker, they can. The easiest way is to put it into a search engine, Gary Thacker, and every comes up, Gaz. Different class.
Follow back forward as well, mate.
Yeah, also on Facebook, you're very upfront on Facebook. So I think your social medias, it's important to get out to the masses. How have you got out to Chelsea Football Club? Have they recognised the book? What's the dynamics there?
It's difficult. The short answer is no, I haven't.
I know,
it's difficult. It's all very corporate these days, mate. And speaking to a lower league club, you've got far more chance. And look, for example, the cover of the book, Out of the Blue, is got Drogba check on the front, but you can't use images from the Premier League era without paying a fee to the club. So they're basically illustrations on the cover of the book, and it tends to be the way, as I say, these days, the Premier League, the money sort of situation with clubs is immense. So no, I did sort of briefly try and explore the club, but it sort of found it very quickly on complications, shall we say.
So with Chelsea images of Premier League, it's all, you have to go through Chelsea, because like if you looked at Chelsea images before the Premier League, probably Getty that owns probably most of them, because that's what happens, doesn't it? The photographers sell the images to Getty, and anyone that writes books and want to put pictures in that they don't own has to pay an absolute king's ransom to get all of that. And probably for only the usage of that book at that time. If you want to rerun the book, you have to reapply and repay exactly, well, probably even more money, if I'm honest, with inflation.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. I mean, when I spoke, it was something I wasn't really aware of. When I spoke to the publishers about the book, and obviously you discussed cover options, that sort of thing, and they mentioned about this. I didn't know, because I said, well, why do you need to illustrate it? What company use, I'm not sure it's Getty they use Picture Libraries, similar to Getty, if it's not Getty.
Yeah.
But then the guy, their sort of designers explained to me about, you have to pay a fee to the club, and so that's why the any covers of that sort of post-Premier League era tend to have illustrations on the front rather than photos, which I guess, that's just the way the world these days, Paul, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think it's sad, and I think that, with the wonderful publication that you've written about Chelsea, it's the season of 2011, 2012, an iconic season. You would think that Chelsea would say, Gary, thanks for writing the book. There's a shelf at the club shop there at Stamford Bridge, and then Chelsea fans can see it on the shelves and purchase it. But in the real world, what we have to do is we have to do these podcasts, etc., put it out on social media, and hope that we get a few bites. And if we hashtag Chelsea or celery or CFC, where did celery come from? It's always something that's amazed me with Chelsea, celery.
I mean, since I've had the Atto TV 2012, I've got a lot of Chelsea followers, and I speak to other who sort of change things about the games and such like. And I've asked a couple of guys, and they don't know. There's even this one guy who's at Blue Balls, something like that, and he's got celery in sort of range of something spread across his Twitter profile, and I thought he's got to know, but he doesn't. So I don't know. It's fascinating.
It is crazy. I mean, I know where the white wall come from. I mean, that was the back of the shed, wasn't it? But, celery, it's still unsold. Yeah.
But, one guy mentioned to me that he thought it was about the time. Do you remember when there was all this fad about taking inflatables to games, like, these inflatable bananas?
Yeah, that was in Ray Varady, wasn't it, at Man City?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said he thought it came from about that sort of time, and somebody taking some in from the shop. I don't, but it seemed a bit too far-fetched, so I really don't know. I'd love to find the answer out myself, but it's a really sort of great mystery.
Well, whether that's a true story or not, why spoil it, because it's fantastic, and you should always end on a good one, so we're going to end there. But finally, is there anything that you want to bring up that we haven't brought up, and anything that you've unearthed? Because we don't want to give too much away about the book, Gary, because we want people to buy the book and go onto Amazon and buy it. Are you selling it from a personal website where you capture more of the money, or is it just the usual socials and stuff?
Yeah, it's the usual ones. I mean, the publishers have their own website to sell from there, which is Pitch Publishing, which they publish some fantastic books. And you mentioned Stevie's and earlier, we all sort of signed up to Pitch. But after the thing about the story, I think it's such a popular story. It's been told so many times. The one thing I'd mention is, and this is something that Terry flagged up. I spoke to Sky, and they were very kind enough to send me the sort of coverage of the documentary they did about the game, about the tournament afterwards. Terry told a story about ahead of the game, Di Matteo arranged for all the players' family and some of the young players' parents to go over to Munich, and ahead of the game, appear sort of at the end of a training session, I think he said it was, to say to the players how proud they were of them and how much they were looking forward to the final, how they believed in them. And he said that, even though Terry said I wasn't playing, it was a really moving situation, moving occasion, and a lot of the players felt inspired. And I suppose that's when you get a sort of player who's into the family of the club, an ex-player, I should say, like Di Matteo, has probably understood the value of that sort of thing and how it would sort of generate. And I guess in the end, you have to say it worked because they won.
Absolutely, and that's old school. That's how we used to manage back in the old days. Gaz, can I thank you so much for your time, sir? All the best with these football times. All the best with the Chelsea book, Out of the Blue. All the best with the Ajax book as well. And all the best for anything else that you're doing. And anytime you need me, I'm only too happy to do a podcast with you and with Stephen or with Stuart. I haven't had the privilege of those boys yet. And well done to Pitch Publishing. You're absolutely spot on. Them guys publish some fantastic football books. And guys, keep writing and keep reading, because these stories should never be forgotten. They're too good.
God bless you, Paul. Thanks for that. You keep these podcasts coming and keep it going with Woody, because it's always fantastic to hear about the great old days.
Cheers, pal. Thanks for your time. Cheers, Mucker. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Well, thank you so much, Gary. Another education. Fantastic broadcaster, writer, author. These football times, prolific, aren't they?
He's a talented guy, isn't he, Gary? You know what I mean? Yeah,
they
these football times is brilliant. Oh, well, yeah, him, like you mentioned on the podcast, Stuart and all of them, etc. as well. I never realised how big the group is actually this sometimes. Because obviously Gary's one of the senior ones. Yeah.
I mean, he's just saying how many's in that management team. It's like, they are a big concern, these football times.
They are.
And if you haven't listened to any of the podcast guys or read any of their books, check them out, because they really are. I call them the educators. They've educated me. And Stuart's latest book, Hispania 1982, or it's just Hispania 82. Stuart Horsfield telling the story of a great World Cup in 82 through the eyes of a 10-year-old, because he was 10 while he was watching that World Cup final. And I'm guessing, I haven't spoken to Stu, but I'm guessing when he done the research for the Brazil 1982, he must have done so much and had so many pieces of paper scattered on the floor, and his
side stories almost, going off. Yeah,
I've done that when I've wrote poems about football, because I do write quite a few football poems as well. And then I'm writing things, I'm thinking, I've got about 3 more poems then on different football players and that. And when you're doing a book, I'm sure that's what he'd done and thought, you know what, I've actually got another book here. And I love Spain 82. So,
great, isn't it?
For the library.
It's good to be hearing Gary talking about when he writes a book, concentrate on one book, but he's obviously got in his mind about another book that springs to it. So, it's pretty much impossible to write 2 books at the same time, but it's interesting. You've got those ideas as you're writing something, but, fantastic.
Absolutely. And it seems as though there's a trilogy as well with the fictional stories. Because he doesn't just write facts, he writes fiction as well.
Great. I've read his book, The Games People Play, Gary's the fictional one, and he clearly knows his football, as we both know. Yeah, that's it's really good. The fictional, I don't not so fan of. I think we talked in the last podcast about mixing fact with fiction. For Damn United. But if you can write a good fiction book and just keep it fiction, there's some really cracking reads out there. And The Games People Play, but Gary's a really good read, It's about a guy, he's obviously knowledge of football, as I say, Gary, and it's about this guy, I won't tell you too much, but it's playing football in Spain, which obviously where Gary lives, doesn't he? He lives out in Spain, so he clearly knows the area as well, but it's really good, and links it, and you can kind of picture it as well, lots of twists and turns. Great book, anyway, that fictional book. I know he did a follow-up one as well, didn't he?
Yeah, on a ball game as well. So
that's it.
So we're waiting for the third one to drop from Gary, but he's prolific. These people are just
prolific,
so
isn't it?
prolific. And
but a great story, that Chelsea one, I would say. Just on the Chelsea one, I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Because it really is incredible, isn't that triumph from when Velos Boris was sacked, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
2 months later, they won the FA Cup and the European Cup. It's incredible, really. It's phenomenal triumph.
So a fantastic book and really, truly against all the odds. I mean, if you would, as Gary said, if you'd have gone to pitch publishing with the idea of this fictional book, they'd have shown you the door.
Too far, isn't it?
Yeah, because it just isn't possible. Gary, just go home and have a chill out, son. Go and have a lie down. That isn't possible. No, but it's not fiction. It's fact. You're joking. They finished 6th in the league. They won the FA Cup, quarter-final of the FA Cup, won the Champions League, had 2 managers. I mean, incredible. And the way that they got to the finals, as he said, I thought it was really poignant when, we can look at the Champions League finals, like, for instance, when Liverpool beat Milan 3-0 down, and the European Champions League finals. But
Man United in '99,
absolutely. But it wasn't just the final with Chelsea. It was the build-up to the final against all odds and the way they come through it and then won the damn final in Munich's own backyard as well. So a fantastic read out of the blue. Thank you so much, Gary, for your time. And thank you so much to Jill Morris, a thriller by Jill Morris, The Big Fix, a matter of life and death, or much more serious. And I haven't read the book yet. It's just dropped. Jill's kindly sent it to me. So if you want any mentions on there, sending Gabbie a book really gets you top of the class. And Jill's going to be my author of the month next month on the podcast. So looking forward to having a chat with Jill. I'm doing another couple of extras.
Well, her book's on my website, if you don't mind. I just put a plug in there. It's on the website as well, so you can put it out on the fiction section on my website.
Yeah,
Jill Morris's book. So I know it was her debut novel, isn't it, The Big Fix? So I know she's a huge football fan. I've spoke to via Twitter kind of thing. So she's I look forward to reading that. Yeah,
and I've got another couple lined up, a book corner extra time or book corner catch up with, if you like. Leo Monaghan, who wrote the Three Kings, Busby, Shankly, Steen, the makers of modern football, which
love that.
it was the book that come out accompanying the Three Kings, the makers of modern football, by our good mate Johnny Owen, filmmaker. So I've got the DVD and the book, and it is absolutely fantastic. When you watch the book and watch the DVD and read the book. I mean, again, I've read half of it. But and you watch it, and it's just the same. He's written it, he's captured it brilliantly.
Yeah.
And Thou Shall Not Pass is Leo's latest book. And Leo's got a project at the moment that he's working on. So it should be done at the end of March. So I'm going to be doing a podcast talking about his writing, his projects, and his latest project, which is an absolute belter. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Really interesting because obviously his dad was a great writer, John Monaghan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who wrote The Soccer Syndrome. That was a football booking, one of the greats. I think it was wrote in the 60s. I might be wrong. So hopefully I'm not that wrong. But Soccer Syndrome is one of those classics. So obviously Leo and his son obviously learned a lot from him. But no, that book, by the way, The Three Kings, is brilliant. The documentary. In fact, if you go onto YouTube, there's a trailer.
Yeah.
And it's one of those trailers. I don't know if you've seen it, Gabbie, but the trailer is a couple of minutes, like hairs on the back of your neck.
Yeah.
The way they do the talking over it, and obviously you've got the voices. You could be, blindfolded. You can recognise Busby, Shankly, Jockstein's kind of voice, can't you?
All Morris as well.
Yeah, and that's what's amazing, isn't it? They're all born in a 30-mile radius of each other. It's incredible, really, in terms of like the size of those clubs now, Manchester United, Liverpool, Celtic. In fact, I've got it here. They've got social media following them three clubs of over 200 million. They're massive clubs, and those three kings, really are the makers of modern football, aren't they?
And how instrumental was Busby into the making of Liverpool and Manchester United, and he was so close to being manager of Liverpool, but he went to United because he was able to build not just a football team, but he wanted to build a football club, and that's why Busby went there. And it just a brilliant book and a brilliant DVD, and just again so much talent out there. Talking, writing, producing, directing, wonderful publications of football. And Richard Whitehead's got the Cup. I know it's a book that you've been highly promoting on your website there. And I'm going to be catching up with Richard, who's a Villa supporter as well.
Oh, is it?
He lives down south now, down in Hampshire.
Right.
Because I did say, you're a Villa supporter. He said, well, you're local. Come into the studio. We can do a little podcast. But no, he lives down in Hampshire. So we will be doing it over the phone like I do with most of them. And
great.
Yeah, so
I've seen a few images. Yeah, I've seen a few images shared of that book for people who've already bought it online, so it's just recently come out. It looks a cracker. Absolutely, some beautiful images, and just, well, as we said, the FA Cup, we talked about it before, it's such a great competition, isn't it? The stories, the tales, etc., and obviously pictures bring it to life, don't they?
Absolutely. So, and the official history of the FA Cup by Miguel, Delaney. There's lots of FA Cup books out at the moment, which is expected because it is, you've already alluded to earlier in the podcast, 150 years of the greatest cup competition in the world. So it's no surprise that there's a number of FA Cup books out, and you can't get enough books. I don't think you can get enough books. Someone will write a book, and then somebody else will write a book, and there's no rivalry. You're just writing books on your different angles, your different ways of looking at it, and your research, and it's all about the beautiful game.
Yeah, no, brilliant, excellent. So I mentioned a few books that's coming up there in March as well, so next month. So there's one that's recently come out, again through the likes of Pitch Publishing, and I think there's a wide diversity. There's a one that's just come out, Please Don't Take Me Home. It's by an Italian guy who writes about his love story of Fulham Football Club. We've all got our own... Fulham Football Club. Yeah, so it says, Please Don't Take Me Home. It's an emotional tale of an Italian immigrant, Simone, I'm going to have an attempt at his surname, Abitati.
I'm glad you said that and not me.
I'm not going to repeat it. So I'm pretty sure I got Simone right, his first name.
Yeah.
So it talks about his 20-year love affair with Fulham Football Club. And, books like this, it just, everyone has got lots of stories about their club, etc. And obviously a must-read for Fulham fans. That one's just come out, and I love Fulham.
How did he get to Fulham? What was he just
saying? Yeah.
That's what I love. How'd you get there and Fulham, and how did you get into the football? And so, great book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fascinating. Craven Cottage is one of my all-time favourite grounds. Love going to there. So,
You go on the boat, or do you not go on the boat?
No, I've never been on the boat myself. No, I know a few people have. Have you?
No. Tom goes watches the Villa home and away everywhere. In fact, he was up Leeds the other night, but he's not been on the boat neither. The Blues fans, the Peaky Blinders have been on the boat.
Interesting fact. All right. Interesting fact. Sorry about the Craven Cottage. Sorry, just there's a new stand being built there, right against the river, and. Actually, I think part of it is an apartment, that newsstand, and it's actually got a swimming pool that's going to be built on the top of it. So I'm not sure many football grounds in the whole of the world will have a swimming pool in it.
I'm not convinced many people would want a swimming pool on the top of a football ground.
So that's unique, isn't it? So,
keep stuff like that away from football fans. They'll be drowning each other.
I know. I just can't. Yeah. But when I heard it was on a game, Fulham were playing against someone on the day on Sky Sports, and the commentator had said something like, I'm looking forward to going in the swimming pool when it opens. I thought, is that real? And I Googled it, and you can see images. If you Google the new Craven Cottage, there it is, a swimming pool on the top of the stadium. There you go. So, March as well, I think we mentioned last week, but Get It On. How the 70s Rock Football by John Sperling.
So you got it?
I haven't as of yet. No, I'm waiting for it to come through. So I'm a bit behind this one.
What a book it is!
I've seen lots of great reviews.
Oh, I tell you what, it's really thick. It's got with the index, it's got over 300 and about 400. So
probably, you've got it then.
Probably about 350 in terms of writing about the 70s, Get It On, and then you've got all the index in the back as well, and some lovely pictures in there. Trevor Francis scoring the winning goal against
Malmo.
Yeah.
In 79. Yeah.
It's a fan there, United fan with a dart in his eye.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, if I was that United fan there with a dart in my eye, Although it looks more like it's on the bridge of his nose, I'd be absolutely blasting. I'd be crying, I would, wouldn't you?
Oh, God, yeah. So was he standing in the crowd, is he?
No, he's got two coppers, or a St John's ambulance and a copper either side of him. Yeah, that was the 70s.
Brilliant.
Ian Wallace in his chocolate Coventry kit. Tommy Docherty winning the FA Cup there with Lou Macari and the looks like England versus Poland picture there.
Is that the Brian Clough one when he talked about the goalkeeper, didn't it?
Yeah, there's a lovely picture of Paul Trevelyan with his target ball on there. Don Reevy and Brian Clough. A picture of David Webb, DJ, Jeff Hurst, Alan Hudson, Alan Ball, Terry Venables, Rodney Marsh, and Terry Mancini. Look, brilliant photographs. If the print is half as good as the photographs, it's going to be a great read. And I know that it's going to be twice as good, to be fair, because the 70s was the greatest era.
That's on my next to read list. Like I say, when it arrives, it'll be arriving soon. So, but I've seen I've seen a number of reviews. Because he interviews the likes of John McGovern, doesn't he, amongst others, Cyril Regis and what have you. So, it was a groundbreaking decade, wasn't it? As we've already mentioned.
I just think it's the halcyon days of football. It was the golden age, the golden decade of football. And I'm going to be doing a podcast with John Sperling to talk about the book Get It On as well. And a great record, T-Rex, Get It On.
Yeah.
What a band they were, weren't they, T-Rex? Didn't realise one of a cousin of Silk.
Is it? Sorry, say it again, Gabbie.
Mark Bolan, Mark Feldman. He was, I think he's second cousin of Barry Silkman. Mark was.
Wow.
Mark Bolan.
There you go.
Yeah. What we did talk briefly about fictional books. There's I don't know if you're familiar with this one, but again, I've done a podcast with Paul Fletcher, the Burnley marksman of the 70s, and he done a book called Saturday Bloody Saturday, a game more serious than life or death, with Alistair Campbell. Are you familiar with this book and the premise of the book?
It does ring a bell. It does ring a bell. Sorry, who's the author? I didn't quite catch you when you said it.
Paul Fletcher.
Paul Fletcher. It does ring a bell, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember. It doesn't leap out. It rings a bell.
Yeah.
So, I've read that many books, but it does ring a bell, that title.
Yeah, I've done a podcast with Paul, and Paul talked to me about it. It's a book about football in the 70s. And it's Alistair Campbell. You mean the journal? It's the Tony Blair, isn't it?
Yeah. I do recognise it. Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, it's come back to me now. So just at a moment then, I was thinking, who's Alistair Campbell? That's it. Yeah.
Alistair didn't write it, but he put his name to it because
I remember that one.
It gives it a little bit more, saleability, if you like, and also he done a lot of work in going to members of the IRA because it's about football in the 70s and bombing of football grounds, etc., etc. Yeah. Although they didn't bomb any football grounds, but it is a novel, and he just wanted to make sure that he didn't upset anybody in the IRA because he didn't want them to come round knocking on the door. And it's the premise of the book is there was a referee in the 70s who refereed games in London, and he stayed in a hotel, and he got a key cut. And whenever he refereed, he stayed in the same hotel. And what he did is he got the key cut of the room, and then when he stayed in the hotel, he was in another room. So he took his key and he robbed the room. And this went on for ages, and they didn't know what was going on. But they looked at the guests and found out that this referee was a guest at the hotel whenever a room got robbed, and he was a kleptomaniac. And Paul, was told this story, so it's based on true things like Leeds United, for instance. There's a chapter about Leeds United, and he phoned up Johnny Giles and said, Johnny, I'd like to just, sign this disclaimer because I don't want you suing me if you read anything about it that you don't like. And the story is on the latest podcast, part 110 of the Curran View. And it's a magnificent book. Saturday, Saturday. It's a fictional book about a referee that was a kleptomaniac, the IRA, and football in the 70s. As Paul said,
well, that's a collective kind of combination, isn't it?
Yeah,
stories there.
So. Every dressing room in the 70s, you'd have the English players, the Irish players, the Welsh players. You'd have a dresser, you'd have a tramp, you'd have a ladies' man, you'd have the same crack in every dressing room. So it's all of that wrapped into a book, Saturday Bloody Saturday. So a great fictional read. And Magical Life in Football, Paul Fletcher MBE, with Dave Thomas, which is his autobiography. What a lovely fella as well, who now designs football grounds.
Football design, it does ring a bell, I've heard of the name. I've heard of the name.
And was instrumental in the university up there in Burnley, football university. Yeah, pretty much a pioneer of football and a pioneer of everything. One of these football players that when he finished, usually they went into either be a car salesman, sell insurance, or buy a pub. Well, Paul Fletcher didn't. He went into other avenues and a tremendous businessman and a lovely. Yeah,
I've heard of the name. Yeah, because you just ring the bell when he said about those stadiums. He's one of those an expert, isn't he? Stadium. Yeah, it does ring a bell. I've heard his work before.
Yeah, he scored a wonderful goal against Leeds United, a bicycle kick in 1974 at Ellen Road, and it's on YouTube only because they were making a documentary on Don Revie. It wasn't to do with football, it was about Don Revie, and it just captured Paul Fletcher's wonderful overhead kick, who he describes fantastic on the recent podcast that I've done with Paul. So what else have you got for me, sir?
Excellent. Well, running through March, so there's a number of books come out in March. I won't go through all of them, but you've got Manchester City, Our Decade, so and it was their decade. So this is the last 2011 onwards, I think it is. So, so that's definite for Man City fans, and obviously under the legendary manager Pep Guardiola. So some great stories in there. So that comes out next week, the 17th of March. The Power and the Glory, Mick Clegg, with Steve Bartram. Okay. Mick Clegg is renowned within world sport as one of the industry's leading coaches, linked very much with Manchester United. He was born in Duckerfield, Greater Manchester, and he's best known for his work during almost a dozen years at Manchester United. He widely accredited with the starring role in the evolution of Cristiano Ronaldo, amongst a variety of other players. So but he left in 2011 and has since used his departure as a springboard for other successes of coaching athletes. So that's, I think it's through Reach Sports, I think is the publisher. I hope I've got that right. The Power and the Glory, Mick Clegg. So it looks an interesting story, again, about his inspirational tale of strengths and weaknesses both in sport and in life, providing an insight into the art of coaching from, it sounds like really from grassroots right up to your world champions, lots of Ronaldo. So, that looks a good read. Football's Great War, 1914 to 1918 by Alexander Jackson. Comes out at the end of March. It's about football during that time, which is quite when you obviously what's happening at the moment in Ukraine, etc. And you think of how that's impacting football bit by bit already, with obviously Chelsea and Roman Abramovich. But 1914 to 1918, and it talks about the game during those times. Which I was looking at some of the facts here. It's incredible when you think about the First World War. 16 million people were killed during that war. It's just a phenomenal figure. In fact, I saw it somewhere. That's more than the population of Sweden and Portugal put together. It's just to give you an idea. It's an immense amount of people that lost their lives.
So that's going to be really... Spanish flu come the year after, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that killed more than the bloody war.
No, that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Incredible. But so yeah, that's about that time. So some really interesting stories in there. I'm sure mentioning that time will be the famous story of the Christmas Truce.
Yes.
On Boxing Day, 1914, when famously the German, and it is a true story.
Yeah.
You can go onto YouTube and likes, etc. There's still old recordings of some of the soldiers who were there in that event. And basically, the Germans on one side of the trenches are whistling and singing carols, and the British on the other side of the trench start singing back, and they just joined up, sharing gifts and photographs, and started to play football in the no man's land in between. So, but it just shows you, the power of football, isn't it, to bring you together. So it'd be really interesting to read that. It links in probably two of my passions. I love world history and obviously football as well. So that's coming out by Dr. Alexander Jackson. He's the creator of the National Football Museum in Manchester as well. Right. So so that looks a really, really good read. So that's coming out at the end of the month.
Any truth that the Germans won 5-4 on penalties?
I'm sure about that. Yeah. I don't know if anyone kept a score. That's always interesting, isn't it? So I know if I was involved, I would have said I scored the winner. So that comes out. A few others in March. You've got probably quite good timing in some ways. Coming out in a couple of weeks is Marcelo Bielsa, The Foundation of Success at Leeds United, by Salim Lemrani. He was his right-hand man when in his first season when he took over at Leeds United. So he lays bare some of his methods and tactics and etc. I think he was also his what do you call it? Speaking on his, because obviously he wasn't fluent in English, was he? So I don't think the interpreter. That's the word. Thank you. But that's his book. So he's got coming out. So but yeah, obviously. Sad to see him leave, isn't it, at Leeds United?
Yeah, I'm surprised, really, in a way. I know Leeds are getting, got smashed a few times, but I don't think that this new fella is the answer. I think Bielsa's a good coach, and I think that he was just a little bit unlucky. Players got injured, key players got injured, and I think that all coaches and managers fall on bad times. I think that they should have been brave enough to keep with Bielsa, and even if he took them down, he'd take them back up again. And I think what Leeds need is a little bit of investment, because when Bielsa took over at Leeds, they wasn't ripping up any trees. He coached them, he got results, he got them promoted, he got them playing some fantastic football in the Premier League, very exciting box office to watch. Yeah, the wheels of his wagon come off a little bit, but I think that's when you need football people working in football clubs, and somebody just ends up. Gaffer, can I just say, if he's the answer, sacking Bielsa isn't the question. Let's carry on with Marcelo. Okay, Marcelo.
How do you suddenly forget everything he did beforehand? And the way he's built, etc. Everyone goes through a rocky period, don't they? Yeah.
Sadly, we spoke earlier on the podcast about Waddington. Waddington had lean years with the 17 years in charge of Stoke City. Alex Ferguson, before he was Sir Alex, had a bit of a rocky start at Manchester United.
Yeah,
Bill Shankly, how many years was it till Bill Shankly won something at Liverpool Football Club?
Coffee, Brighton.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Go on, can't you?
But if you have football people working in that football club, when somebody says, I think we should sack the manager, somebody should have the balls to say, I think you should be looking in the mirror, Mr. Chairman. I think you should be the one that's been sacked, not him.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But,
absolutely. No, Marcelo, but there's another book that it makes me think of when you're talking about Marcelo Bielsa. There was one called The Quality of Madness, The Life of Marcelo Bielsa by Kinnard. Came out a few years back. It's a brilliant book. Again, it just tells you what it was. Brilliant coach, coached some of the great names, like Batistuta, Tevez, I remember, Veron, and he's cited as the mentor for Pep Guardiola. You know, so he's not done too bad, has he?
Uddy always maintains you can either be a coach or you can be a manager. And I think Bielsa is one of the great coaches of modern football.
Yeah.
I just question whether he's a manager. Now, whether Bielsa needed... And the fella that's doing well at Huddersfield, he was with him, wasn't he? And
he was. Yeah.
Now, you know, we don't know what impact that has on a manager. And you know, especially a manager... I know he's managed and he's been around for a long time. Of course he has. But managing in the Premier League is a little bit different to managing in other countries. You know, and it's a very, very unforgiving league. You've only got to get off to that bad start and, you know, get injuries and et cetera. But if you've got somebody there to fall back on that's, you know, working on the defensive side of the game, for argument's sake, that is no longer there, then sometimes it gets highlighted. And I'm not saying that's what happened, but it could be. And I would like football clubs to be a little bit more forgiving, understanding, and work with the managers and work with the players, and instead of just sacking them when it starts getting a bit bad.
Well, I think back to Gary's Gary Thacker's latest book about Chelsea kind of thing. When Di Matteo, you know, he took over, obviously, and he won the FA Cup Champions League, and he was sacked, I think, in November of that year, so only a few months later.
Absolutely.
So he's just won, arguably, the two biggest holy grails, aren't they, of club football? And
Carlo won the double. Carlo won the double and got sacked.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I mean, it is a basket case, really. I mean, if you're looking at Watford and Chelsea, very, very similar, but very, very different as well. You know, I've always thought that you're best backing your manager and having that little bit of, you know, continuity that builds and breeds success.
If you apply that scenario in everyday working life, I think there's a lot of people listening to this podcast that would be thinking, crikey, I'm glad he didn't get rid of me last month because I was rubbish.
Well, I mean, it's just bonkers, isn't it, really? But, you know, football is a bonkers business, really.
But that's good timing, though. So that book, by Salim Lamarani, so that's probably good timing for him. That book's coming out in a couple of weeks' time, so because it'd be interesting to see. Yeah, that was about working alongside him in his first season at Leeds United. The next book I'll mention is, there's again March, Fields of Wonder by Eben Marshall. This is about the incredible story of Northern Ireland's journey to the 1982 World Cup.
Right.
So that's coming out. So by the end of the 1970s, Northern Ireland, the football team, was languishing in the doldrums. You know, obviously the trouble of the back, civil unrest, and obviously all the troubles, etc. And I'm reading through here. Obviously they finished bottom of the British Championship, as you remember that, for the fourth successive year.
They were
winning a single game.
The home
champions.
internationals.
Do you remember them?
Bring them back,
Yeah, we used to love them, didn't
England versus Scotland on a Saturday. Come on, let's have a bit of that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Why can only rugby have that? I mean, at the moment, as we're speaking and recording this, it's like England versus Ireland tomorrow. If only football still did that, the home internationals. What would we rather watch? England versus Ireland, Wales, Scotland, or England versus Lithuania? Mind you, I mean, that might be Russia next month, mightn't it? I mean, the way the world's going, we might not have all these shrinking sides and all these fragmented countries. But, you know, I would rather have home internationals than watch England play against some of the dirge that I've watched us play, and then invite over Brazil and Argentina. Let's go back to the 70s when it was the beautiful game rather than the...
And there were big tournaments. There were big tournaments, weren't they? When you think, just recently, England, Scotland playing in the Euro Championships, didn't they, at Wembley? So it was great for both sets of fans. Everyone loves it. Loves the camaraderie and the banter. And, I think rugby have got that right, haven't they, in rugby union, haven't they? The Six Nations.
Yep, but there you go.
Yeah.
What else we got?
So, that's Fields of Wonder. So, that comes out. So, also in March, I think we've already mentioned the FA Cup book by Michael Delaney that comes out, so celebrating the 150th.
Mm-hmm.
The Last Busby Babe, the autobiography of Sammy McElroy, with
Wayne.
one of the great writers, Wayne Barton, prolific writer, obviously in Manchester United. So
I'm hoping to do a podcast with, I've asked to do a podcast with Sammy.
Great.
I'd love to do one with Sammy. I'd love to do a book signing with Sammy. I have put it in there, so I'm trying to bring him over to the Black Country, to the bar in Wollaston, the Britannia Sports Bar. I think that'd be fantastic. Bring Lou Macari, bring Jimmy Greenough, and I'll bring Alan Hudson. We can have, a great little get-together there.
That'll be a good night.
Yeah,
excellent.
well, Uddy played with Sammy at Stoke City, 83-84 season. So it's going to be, and it was Sammy was the last player that Busby bought. That's why it's the Last Busby Babe, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Terrific
the last player signed by the legendary Sir Matt Busby. Yeah, is a bona fide Old Trafford legend, an intrinsic part and fabric of the illustrious history. So, Super Sam. And he went to manage his country after a successful spell in charge of Macclesfield Town as well. So,
great player. Good player, Sam.
Yeah.
He made his debut at age 17, didn't he? Scored against Man City on his debut.
Yeah, that's it.
But, tremendous player. And Uddy said, great player, great lad, Sammy.
But there looks a great book. So just as you mentioned here, from the anxiety of his homesickness to the exhilaration of his club debut, you just referred to, from the highs of his heartbreaking exit. From the lows of his heartbreaking exit from United, to the highs of his what went on to follow. And Wayne Barton's a great one to talk about with, because he's a fantastic and
he's got one out about Wayne, hasn't he, at the moment? Wayne Rooney. He
has, I think we mentioned it last year. The teenage kicks, Wayne Rooney. Yeah.
And he done the one, of course, about George Best last year. He's wrote loads.
True genius.
He wrote loads of books. He's a good lad. I was interacting with him last week, so I'm hoping to do something with either Wayne or Sammy. So, looking forward to that.
Excellent. Addicted to Football is the next one. A journey from Anfield to almost everywhere by John Newby. So Addicted to Football is the autobiography of a former professional footballer. His career took him from one single Premier League appearance in Liverpool to playing for clubs all over the country in top 8 tiers of the football pyramid, including Scottish football. So this guy's done it all, really. So and it basically talks about it looks a fascinating life story. Love books like this. These ones that you don't, the players that are not well known, and some of the stories they tell are great because it links with the everyday. Because we love to talk about the great stories, successes, those players, but there is so many players that got to that high and came down really quickly and had to adapt to life. But it seems a fascinating insight into it's an unpredictable world of being a journeyman footballer. John's biggest battle, it says here, however, came when he was diagnosed with an incurable heart condition, and the game he was addicted to put his life in serious danger. So, it's a really interesting. That's come out through Pitch Publishing as well. That comes out at the end of the month. So
they do some great books, don't they, Pitch?
They do. And these stories are just great stories, aren't they? So and Pitch just seem to manage to attract the real cream of the crop, don't they? So that looks a cracker coming out. A bit closer to home for us at Walsall. There's 90 minutes from Europe. And that comes out on Monday as we're talking, by Simon Turner. And it's, the summer of 1983. So Walsall's greatest cup run, which took them all the way to that memorable semi-final against Liverpool in I think it's 83. I'm not sure I can see it on here, but I'm sure it was 1983, around about that time. So, and the idea, I think the name of the book, it's the 90 minutes from Europe, is linked to the idea how you could quickly get to European countries, or European cities, you could reach from Birmingham Airport. So, fantastic, and a great read, certainly for Walsall fans as well. And a ground I always like looking at when you come down the M6 and you look across right there next to it. The old Bescott, etc. So the ground, lots of memories. So that's that one, and a couple of others I'll mention. One Day in April is a Hillsborough story by Jenny Hicks. And, this is a sad story. Jenny Hicks, her husband and two teenage daughters, Sarah and Vicky, went to the last football match and never returned. So this is written by the mother. Writing back of the, since, one day on the 15th of April in 1989. So it's written by Jenny Hicks. That comes out at the end of the month. And, that's sure to be an emotional story as well, as she opens up for the first time to talk about just an absolute tragedy. And I know I've seen her husband's, I've seen a number of documentaries, just such a sad day, isn't it? So, she's writing a book that comes out at the end of the month. And the last one I mentioned...
just before you go on to your next one, I was working that day as a black cab driver.
Were you?
Yeah, because Everton played at Villa Park.
Yeah.
And I remember I just pulled off, not dropping down at Villa Park, but I'd already dropped a load of Evertonians down at Villa Park. And I just pulled down New Street Station and listening to the radio, and it said that there was a bit of crowd disturbance, because that's as it was reported at first, crowd disturbance at Hillsborough, and then it started coming out through the news bulletins, etc. that there'd been a real problem at Hillsborough. And I remember picking up the Evertonians and Everton fans coming back to New Street Station, and them being so concerned about Liverpool fans and what had gone on at Hillsborough. And they were all, in a state of shock, and it was, none of us really knew what really went on at that time. I mean, you could argue that lots of us didn't really know what went on after a very long period of time, but in the immediate aftermath, as Everton fans were coming back from the semi-final that they'd won, and looking forward to going to Wembley, they really were, crestfallen about their brothers of Liverpool.
This is a time before we had your mobile phones, etc., isn't it? So you couldn't get that information quickly enough. And
it was literally
I watched a documentary recently of Anne Williams, who was one of the Hillsborough family support group. Because there's two tragedies, isn't there, really? The tragedy of the day and the tragedy of the cover-up, which is just so... Anne Williams talks about when she had to drive down to Hillsborough, to find out what was happening, really. So she's an incredible lady. So, it's very sad. But that book comes out. And the last one I've just mentioned is there's a book coming out, How Not to Run a Football Club. And this is by a guy called Nathan Fogg. This book's been attempted to come out for a while, actually, but for some reason the publications of it's been pushed back. I think there might have been some issues in terms of the content of it. It needs to be checked out, let's say, and get proof. But it's basically about Blackpool FC and the Oystons, etc. And the challenges, and let's say the protests, boycotts and court cases, the inside story of Blackpool FC. So, obviously the fans really did pull together, didn't they, to finally get rid of them at some eventually. So
I've always been an advocate of that. If you don't like what's going on in your football club, which clearly Blackpool fans didn't with the Oystons, boycott it. I know it's a bit of tough love, but if you boycott, you stay away, you starve them of any income, they'll soon go. I went on strike probably now 11 or 12 years, just after the Carling Cup final of, 2011, when Birmingham City won.
I was there. I was at that game, Gabbie.
Really?
I was, actually, the top tier. So I had a good view down when he got there. I have to go his name. What is his name? He scored it.
Obafemi Martins.
That's it, of course, Martins, absolutely.
Martins. So, and after that, it really did go tits up for Birmingham. But, I'd, through my links, had been told, about ownership of Birmingham and what was going on and stuff. And I did say to the Birmingham City supporters, I made it very clear through social media, etc. We should all boycott, not go in. Go to the ground, yeah. By all means, go to the ground. Okay, they've had our season ticket money, but refuse to go in and cause some scenes if you like, and you'll get press attention, etc., etc. It all fell on deaf ears. I got blacklisted, etc., etc., and what have you. And so I don't bother with my football club largely because of that. But I'd be very interested. I still buy that about Blackpool because I've got a lot of respect and time for the Blackpool fans that did that, because that's exactly what I said or suggested we should do at Birmingham City. And if we'd have done that, we'd have got our football club back. But they're still not sure who owns the football club to this day. Well, and they're still looking for the owners. Should have boycotted it and got your club back.
Yeah. Now, I think this line, but in the synopsis of the book pretty much says it, how not to run a football club is the inside story of how one family nearly ran a football club to its death. Yeah. And how a community brought it back. Yeah. And that is football fans getting together and saying, hold on, no, it shouldn't work like this. This is our club, not yours. Yeah. And they hit back, and well done to them. So, So that's coming out. Yeah, next week that comes out. So that's by Nathan Fogg. Again, from the guys at Pitch Publishing. So you just knew it would be Pitch Publishing. It'd be linked to crack a little story there. Club.
It could be about a number of football owners, couldn't it, really? Because most of them haven't got a clue how to run a football club. But there you go.
One way or another.
What else have you got for us? Have you got anything else?
Sorry, there was one other I forgot to mention that's coming out in March. It's called In Soccer, in American Culture, the beautiful game Struggle for Status. This is published by an American publisher, and it's coming out in March. So it's by a guy called G. Edward White, and it talks about the first is why the sport of soccer failed to take root in the United States when it spread from England. And it's basically talks about considers the early history of association football and how it's built up in America. So and linking it to the American culture. So it sounds a really interesting read.
Is that during the NASL days? Is that what it centres around?
I don't think so. It looks more before. Yeah, I think it looks more around the pioneering. From reading the synopsis, it looks okay. There's a link obviously to the football as well, but I think it seems to talk about insights about the sociology and economics, etc., and multiple factors that resulted in the sport of soccer struggling to achieve major status in America. But I'm sure that'll be mentioned in there because, of course, that skyrocketed and made, as we know, rock and roll football, wasn't it? When that came about in the 70s, the NASL. So I'm sure that's mentioned in there. So that looks an interesting read. It's being published by an American company publisher. So I've seen it on Amazon. So I'm sure it would be because normally some of these books sometimes if it gets popular, something comes over to England and it's published by someone over here. So you can probably pick it up a little. Cause I think I looked on Amazon. I hope I'm not doing a disservice. They look quite expensive. So you're probably paying for shipping, etc. as well. So
do, to be fair, especially if it's a book. I mean, if
it's not being published here.
No, sometimes when there's a book and it's like with Ken, for instance. Every book's been sold. There's a number of books that are like that, and then when someone's selling a book and it's a bit popular, they put it up like you go on Amazon, how much? £1,000. You're having a laughing, yeah? £1,000 for that book. But it's because someone's selling it privately and they can get away with it. But then when it gets republished and then you have another run of books, then you haven't got that scenario. So I get what you're saying there. It's a sad reflection of some parts of humanity in football supporters. Why you would want to sell a book to another football fan for over £1,000 is beyond me, but there you go.
I know. There's a very famous book, great book called Tor. It's about German football.
Yeah.
And if you ever went, that's it. Yeah. And if you ever went onto Amazon a few months back, you'd be spending a lot to try and get a copy of that if you've not got one. But he's actually now, though, he must have realised this, and he's bringing out a paperback version, an updated version comes out, I believe it's in May. So that's by Uli Hess. So, obviously a lot cheaper than I'm sure I saw it somewhere quoted about £200 to buy a copy of it. Now, I love my books, don't get me wrong, but I'm not sure my love of my wife would be quite as strong after purchasing the book for that kind of price. So,
I know what you're saying, mate.
I think I might be outdoors quite quickly.
Just buy it and don't tell her. If I wanted something that bad, I would, but I wouldn't tell her.
True.
There's a couple of books I want to give a shout out to.
Yeah.
That I've noticed either on your pages or elsewhere. Beyond the Iron Curtain by Jonathan Wilson. Again, looks quite topical at the moment with that Iron Curtain that now seems to be coming back down that was once lifted. And a great football writer to boot. The Smell of Football too. I think we spoke about that last podcast in episode 5. 3 goalkeepers and 7 goals. I've got that. I'm interested in that because I do a series of podcasts, Game of My Life, and this is about a game of Leicester's life, and I'm interested how they can flesh it out and make a book from
of one game.
Yeah. So I bought that. I do buy books for learning from, and not just learning about the game, but learning and getting experienced. So that's a book that has caught my eye. Life with the Robins and Beyond, the Jeff Merrick story by Neil Palmer, who was one of the authors of the week in part 4. A great story about the Ashton Gate 40 years ago, ripped up the contracts and saved the football club, which you probably wouldn't get today, but we did back then when, I wouldn't say players cared more because I think that's unfair. Lots of modern day players do, but I think what they'd done was fantastic. And then a cluster of people that said, please can you give our book a shout out on Book Corner? Be my guest, Football Superstars in Australia.
Fair Play Publishing.
Jason Goldsmith gave me a tug and says, can you give it a plug? And there was Kevin Keegan signed over there in Australia. I mean, again, they didn't play for that many games, but they still played over there. I know Supermac, because Malcolm was telling me pre-season, he used to go and play out there in, I think it was Melbourne. There was a side out there that Malcolm played for. And a number of players played over there in Australia. And the A-League now seems to be taking shape. Robbie Fowler managed over there, and there's one or two players that have come over here and cut out good careers. So
you got Georgie Best on the got Georgie Best on the front of that cover of that book, haven't you, by Jacob Goldsmith? So I mean, Aussie, I think Trevor Francis, Bobby Moore, a few others. They played down in Australia as well for a short period, I think.
Yeah, so
that seems to ring a bell. Yeah.
Be my guest, Football Superstars in Australia. So check that one out. Anna Black, This Girl Can Play by Texie Smith. I don't know if you're familiar with that book.
I am, I'm familiar with Texie Smith. So he's one of the Texie Smith was one of the first people that ever contacted me when my website first come live. Right. So quite interesting really. He lives in Australia. He's a big Geordie, Newcastle United fan, and I'm familiar with him. And he's wrote a number of fiction books. A bit like we were talking about Gary Thacker earlier, kind of. If you can get a good story, and get it right. And Texie Smith, I love his name as well, Texie Smith.
Great name, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if that was the original name. I'm sure he'll tell us. But but he's done a trilogy of books, and I've read and I've actually got a review of one of his books on my website called Gerard Black, The Guilty Party. It's about the life of an Australian journeyman. So he's linking it, you can tell, to his kind of life story and in a fictional sense. And he's also brought out Anna Black, This Girl Can Play. So, but it is fictional writing they get it right, can be a really good read. And Texie Smith is a really good writer. And again, I think that's through Fair Play Publishing as well. So, yeah, recommended read that one.
Fantastic. The Peter Barnes authorised biography by Dr. Gary James. Now, Gary's
prolific
quite
writer.
Prolific, isn't he? I remember Roy Savannah telling me about Gary. Fantastic Manchester City books that he's written. So it's the authorised biography. And I mean, what a player Peter Barnes was. One of
On a Wing and a Prayer, isn't it? I think that book, the subtitle is of that one.
It may well be. I haven't got that in my library, but I think I should do.
I've seen it.
Great player. The Life and Death of Andy Durkett, the Durkett Project by Jonathan Northall. Was one that he posted up and said, "Can you give us a shout?" So yes, we just have. Yeah,
I love the front cover of that one. So this is out by Pitch Publishing as well. That one. So an interesting story because again, I love these ones. I didn't know about it myself, but he's fascinating guy and also captivating biography. He's famous both in cricketing world and the football world. So he played for Woolwich Arsenal, as it was known then. And then he was sold to the most successful club at the time, Aston Villa. And he captained Villa to the FA Cup in 1920, to their sixth FA Cup. A sixth FA Cup they won in 1920. So you forget how successful Aston Villa were at the start of the century. It's incredible.
Villa were one of the world great football clubs. Yeah. Under George Ramsey, they won 6 championships and 6 FA Cups.
That's it, yeah. It's incredible, isn't it? Incredible stats. But yeah, so Andy Durkett, he one of those rare people to play both England and cricket. I always think of Ian Botham, because he did, didn't he? I think he played at Northampton, if I remember, in his early career. Before he came... Oh, just Scunthorpe, sorry, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure where Northampton come from, but... So yeah, that looks an interesting read, and... sadly, I did read that Andy Durkett. He died early when he was 56, and he was the only person who died whilst he was playing in a match at Lords at the cricket ground. So sounds like an incredibly sad ending, but incredibly gifted sportsman. So that looks really interesting book. Really interesting, great cover as well. Again, I've got to say it. Yeah. I know I keep repeating myself, but it's a great looking cover as well. So The Life and Death of Andy Durkett, Jonathan Northall.
I think I shall put him into Time Vault and have a look at Andy Durkett and get the book as well. Yeah,
I never realised how much he was involved in his life. I really didn't. Yeah. He made Arsenal's greatest 50 players as well. Oh. But he scored over 23,000 first-class runs for Surrey.
So, blimey, Jimmy Drew scored 357. That's one hell of a strike rate, that is.
Yeah, good job I said runs at the end of that, man. So, no, runs, in cricket. So, I don't think it was that prolific in football, but no, anyway, it was a great story.
Fantastic.
Fascinating life.
Charles Alcock and the Little Tin Idol by Inchester. We've already given that a mention. Peter Roberts says, have you ever mentioned Park Life? I said, well, we did, to be fair, on episode 5, because I did comment about Blur made a great record as well. And you spoke about that. It's about non-league, isn't it? Non-league football, Park Life.
Yeah, really good fun book. It's about the team 4 seasons run the football, it's Sunday League football as well. So it's cracking. I could when I was reading it, because I played Sunday League football as well. You can sense when you're reading through it some of the characters in it, and it's funny stories as well. And there's definitely a camaraderie in there. So some great stories. And drinking in the changing room. I think when they won it was a cup, but they were giving drinks to have in the change room afterwards, and there was none of that shaking it up and everything. They were necking it. They were necking the drinks down. They weren't going to let it to waste, etc. So, but no, a lot of great characters. Great little book, really, really nice about grassroots football, which is, as he puts here, actually, I'm looking at it now, reflects on it. Grassroots football, real football, providing us excellent times, brilliant memories, and lifelong friends. And isn't that what's important, is it? Football
Absolutely.
As well. Making friends.
Having a drink before the game isn't uncommon. Ron Saunders used to give the Villa players a nip of brandy before they went out.
Yeah?
And Ron always had a bottle of brandy in the kit bag. Have a swig of this before you go out. I mean, the younger players, I was telling him all he was telling me, the younger players used to spit it out, but the older players had a bit of swig of brandy and then went out. It didn't do them any harm. They won the league and then season after won the European Cup. Told a great story about Ken McNaught because the doctor, he was a very famous doctor that used to look after Villa in the early 80s. He used to do the boxing down the NE3 as well. He was a really, really, very prominent doctor. And Ken McNaught had got a real bad gash and he had to go and get stitched up by the doctor. So Ken went down there, got in the treatment room, and the bottle of brandy has come out, and Ken's gone to thanks Doc. And he said, "Oh no, Ken, that ain't for you, that's for me." He had a swig of brandy and then stitched him up. But football and alcohol's always mixed, and it's a great effects with Aston Villa in the. I think Leeds United. I think they used to have a drama or two as well. But he didn't. And Audie tells some great stories. Particularly the one at Highbury when a player was still half cut from the night before. He couldn't even do his laces up. No names. We'll never mention who it was, but that is a true story at Highbury. Stoke City did go on and win the game 1-0, and Alan Hudson scored the winning goal.
Great stories.
Yeah, Peter Whittle, the 1888 letter. Are you familiar with that book?
Yeah, I've seen it. I've not read it myself, but I'm familiar with it. I think that's he's wrote a book about before the Premier League, history of Football League's last decades. Before the Premier League changed the shape of modern football. Obviously, it's brought its good things. The quality of football is incredible. That's obviously quality of football pitches are incredible nowadays, aren't they, compared to some of the mud baths? I've seen that. It looks an interesting read about football prior to 1992. So remembering the great decades that we talk about a lot as well. So I'm aware of that. Yes, yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so,
finally on my side, Chris Pullen, playing for keeps.
Fiction book. Yeah.
So Chris, can you give us a plug? So we have. So guys, if you want to have your book mentioned and give it a plug on Book Corner, Part 7, it will be next month in April. Just give us a heads up on either Facebook or Twitter. So, and we will
feel free to contact. Yeah, feel free to contact myself as well on Twitter. So and I'll be happy to give you a plug through our channels as well. So absolutely, always there to promote books as we are, aren't we?
Absolutely,
as we both said as well. So there's great stories out there, and to get them out in the open so more people know.
Football books.
Yeah, absolutely, and reading them as well from time to time, Gabbie.
Well, yeah, I mean you do. How many have you read this month? By the way, we usually start with what books have you read. So we'll finish on how many books have you read? Because it has only been 3 weeks, not 4 weeks as usual. Yeah. So 2 books this month have you read? Yeah,
and you did help me out with one I did want to mention actually because I've only just started it, but I've only read a couple of books and that's included the one I've just started. So since we last spoke, so this is the book I've just recently given sent to me, The Towering Tales and a Ripping Yarn, Yorkshire Football's Grassroots Legends by Stephen Penny. So it's basically a trip around the football fields of Yorkshire during the 2020-21 season. So there's a lot of people out there that love ground hopping, going from ground to ground, and there's some wonderful grounds, and it's a great way to learn about parts of the county as well. So, but this is a book he's written, and he links it as well to some famous stories and players that we'll know of as well. But I can show you more on our next podcast because, like I said, I've literally just started it. But that's Towering Tales and a Ripping Yarn. It's available on Amazon, and it's out via Victor Publishing, which is a publishing company I'm familiar with as well. They've produced a number of excellent books.
Groundhoppers are great, aren't they?
Yeah, oh, they are. There's some great stories. I remember reading one book that sticks out, where the guy, he was travelling from week to week to see various clubs, but he bumped into a German who loved their groundhopper, and they loved coming over to Britain and going around. He'd done 30 games in 30 days. So 30 grounds in 30 days. It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just another breed,
how people find the time, but it's another thing. I managed to do that.
Well, I think they find the time because I haven't found a bird. I think that's the thing.
But no, I love it. So it was great. Yeah, it's great. It's not just football in the Premier League and all that, is there? There's great football to be played everywhere. And go and support your local team as well if you can. So I certainly do.
I remember reading a tweet from a groundhopper about a stadium announcer. If I got a gun, I'd shoot him. I replied to him, thanks very much for that.
Yeah.
It was about
great. All right. Excellent. Some great stories out there.
Solihull Moors. I used to do it for Birmingham City Ladies. But, they were short a couple of times, so I stepped in and done the stadium announcing.
Did you?
Yeah.
And it didn't go down too well then?
Well, the chairman crying, saying, Gabbie, please don't be yourself. Just,
Right.
Yeah, we can't afford any fines. Oh, that's confidence as I'm going up the stairs. But, yeah, there you go. But, yeah, groundhoppers are fantastic, and it's all football opinions, isn't it? You pay your money, you take your chance, and you have your opinion.
I went to a local game not far from me. I've got to tell you this story, Bromsgrove, and there was a lady, I remember seeing her walking up thinking, she's got this big bag, she's carrying something heavy, and I think, what on earth have you got in your bag? What are you bringing her back to the football anyway? So you must have lots of food in there for half time. And as the game starts, she's pulled out of her bag this like a cowbell. Great big bell, and it rattles, and it's like one of those you get on the top of a church. And she did it for the first 10 minutes. I thought, is she gonna? I hope she's not going to do this full 90 minutes because this will just. I could see everyone looking around going, "What is?" You get some characters, don't you?
You get some right nutters. To be fair, you do. Non-league and women's football, you get some right nutcases.
Excellent.
They're on down release, aren't they? Right.
Yeah.
So anything finally before we close the podcast? It's been an absolute joy, a pleasure, love to you and yours, and thank you all for listening. The final word is yours, sir.
Yeah, well, I would like to give. I always feel we should give it a mention because you do mention it. It's Grandad, What Football Like in the 1930s by Richard Crooks. It's definitely worth a mention as well. It's to go back. I had the idea actually. We were thinking last time we should maybe read a page on every podcast, and eventually maybe we could combine them all together and somehow. I'm sure Richard won't mind us doing like what do you call it? An audible version of it. So, but I do feel we should give that a shout out as well because it is a cracking book, that one. So
I am the worst reader in the world, though. I can't
get beyond 100 page, 106 or whatever it is.
165, I think.
Yeah, 165. Yeah,
but
that's a great book.
I'm terrible at reading out loud. I mean, if I had to actually read a script on any of my podcasts, I just don't think I could be able to do it. I just talk off the cuff. And then we just go onto one thing, bullet points and stuff, and then talk about it. But I actually couldn't read it. In fact, when I do get a book, for instance, the Stoke City, we'll finish on this, and I go, the year we nearly won the league charts one of the closest ever top flight title battles in English football. It was 1974-75, and with just 4 games to go, no fewer than 10 clubs had a chance of winning. One was Stoke City, fielding the best team that they'd ever had. Now, if you want to listen to me do a talking book, I think you should lie down in a darkened room and find yourself a life.
You could get one of those jobs. I don't know. You probably do all the CBeebies. They do 10 to 7. They get someone famous in to read a book for the children and they put them to sleep. So maybe you should get on that.
Yeah, they go. Yeah, Bab, here's your bottle of milk. Gabbie's going to talk to you.
That's it. Excellent. Then get on a podcast.
Right,
great.
till next time, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've done over
Likewise.
2 hours, and with the interview with Gary, it's almost a 3-hour special. But we just love talking books, so happy reading, guys.
Happy reading all. Thank you all. Take care.
Cheers, pal. Till next time.
All
See
the
you
best.
later, Andy.
Ta-da. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.
Bye.